I'm offset here, aren't I? There we go. That is weird. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. I am your host, the God Emperor of... Wait, no, that's not true. To quote Doctor Who, I am not a god. I am not a god. I also forgot to take my vitamin C this morning. Let's do that really quick. There we go. Good morning to Zara, Cloud of the Stars, Justin, Dakota. What's up, guys? And Platty. I need to get my link ready. Good morning, Kingsfold. Which is somewhere... Is this it? Nope, that's the Tariffs thing. That's the Voot. Where the hell? There it is. What is this? Oh, that's the... Oh, I forgot about that one. Right, we need to talk about that. I'm going to add that to the topic list. What do I call this? Let's call this... what do I call this? I don't know what to call this. People are dumb? Is that what we should call this? Call it that. We'll just be nice and simple with it. So, I'm actually going to be saying this twice today because I want as many people in on this as possible. So I've been pushing forward through Jimmy Bailey. Now, Jimmy Bailey has been in my way constantly. Like, it's this massive berry. He has a superpower to turn into a brick wall. And I keep trying to push through him. It's just... And then I just admire the bricks. He has such wonderful bricks. It's not my fault. Look at the detailing on this. They even meshed that. Anyways, thank you very, very much, Jimmy Bailey. As ever and as always, much appreciate those subs. Thank you. If you'd like to put that sub towards something that interests you, let me know. If you're interested in everything, we have an interested in all category that you can put it towards as well. Where's the thing? There it is. So, random news. So yeah, I'm going to mention this here at the beginning of the VOD. I'll also be putting a link down in the description for those of you watching this on YouTube. So, and I'll be linking something in chat, basically right now. One of the things I've been trying to do is to really get started on basically a series of mini audiobooks about the lore extant. My setting, you know, this thing, and I have been... It's basically the only thing I have the feasibility of doing right now with my schedule, because I can barely keep up with the rest of my job right now. I literally don't even have time to do mini nations right now. So the idea is, you know, I'll do these little audio bits of me narrating. Now, I've been pushing through each of the obstacles in the way that are not Jimmy Bailey in the way of me doing that for some time now, for several weeks now, in my copious amount of spare time. And I've basically bypassed all those barriers except for one. The one thing that I haven't decided yet is how we're going to do the actual voice. My voice. Now, I actually recorded something that is... Whoops, that's the wrong window. There we go. So, if you go to this page here, which I've just linked in chat, and again, I'll link that down below in the YouTube description. That should lead you to a MP3, which you can either download or play. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to listen to that, and then I want you to vote on this, which I will also be putting down below, again, in the YouTube description. Now, please, 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 I know this is kind of we're on the honor system here, but I'm begging you not to vote until you've heard the styles. Because whatever wins, wins. That's what we're going to do for the whole series. And I want something that everyone likes. I want something that is good for everyone. So please do not vote unless you have already heard it. You don't have to vote right now. That's going to be up for about the next week or so. The idea, fingers crossed, the idea would be to go ahead and release the actual first episode, which part of the first episode is actually in that audio file, next week. So please and thank you. Now, Jimmy Bailey wants to put it towards Crash. Jimmy Bailey, 14, Crash. So noted. And thank you again, sir. So, random news. I actually got a lot of random news this week because we skipped last week. What if you voted? Then you voted. You're done. WoW Classic has release date, August 27th. Woo! If you want to change it, you're screwed! Seriously, there's no way to change that to my knowledge. I mean, that's not true. If you have a login and you voted with your login, you can change it, but otherwise you're screwed. WoW Classic has got a release date, August 27th, 2 days before the anniversary of the show, which I find funny. I've said this before and I've said this again. I'm actually quite in favor of WoW Classic. I have no interest in it whatsoever myself, and I'd probably rather rip my teeth out than play it again. But I'm actually pretty happy with the fact that it's happening. I do have to point out how amusing it is, because I've seen two repeating tones when it comes to people reacting to WoW Classic on the beta. Tone 1 is, hang on, this isn't working right. No, it is. Well, what about this thing? No. Well, what? No. There's a list that Blizzard themselves have been keeping track of, although Wowhead has their own list as well, of things that are not bugs in WoW Classic. And it is hysterical to me how many people have forgotten or aren't aware of how many things are convenience features or things that were designed after WoW Vanilla. And it's a huge list. I'm not even going to list it for you right now. I mean, good on them for due diligence, but no, it's not a bug. That's just WoW Vanilla. Have fun. The other thing I've seen is a lot of people speaking about how it's the best thing ever and how it has completely revitalized WoW and how WoW will die horribly in favor of WoW Classic. So the other side of the extreme, basically. Shrug. I've already said my piece on this. I have no interest in it personally. I'm sure there are people who are interested in it, and I'm happy that it's an option. Woo. Next thing. Any of you ever played The Council? Because I haven't, but the devs who made that are actually making another Vampire the Masquerade game. And I say another. What I mean by that is we've got Bloodlines 2, which is probably coming out next year. So that's what I mean by another. There's a second game that's going to be coming out soonish. I'm not sure what I think of that, but, anything... Yeah, tell me about it, Shaludo. Oh, my God. But woo. It'll be nice to see some Vampire the Masquerade love. I found myself wondering why Vampire the Masquerade is starting to see games now, whereas it basically hasn't for quite some time. But then again, I started thinking about the behind-the-scenes thing and Paradox, and they've probably opened up the license a little bit, and we're just now seeing the fruits of that. That's just my guess. I don't actually know. Panic is releasing the Playdate. Okay, Platty. I don't know what I think of that. So for those of you who haven't seen this, it's this big... I know, right, Max Time? It's this big yellow, not Game Boy thing. And the stated intent is to release tons of games on it, which are just random, fun, silly, weird games. This is another one of those things that I am, in favor of from a conceptual thing, but I have no interest in it personally. Because it's just a bunch of fun, random, weird games, and I don't want fun, random, weird games. I want fun games that are neither weird nor random. But it's a thing, and that's why this is just random news, because I don't have anything to say about it other than that. Nope, I'm actually on the moon right now, Seraphim. As you can see, I'm streaming up here. So here's one that I've heard a lot about. They've talked about a KOTOR movie. This is a really weird thing to talk about, because I have heard a lot of people saying, oh my god, it's confirmed they're making a KOTOR movie. No, it isn't. Now, granted, I haven't checked into this since yesterday, but last I checked, this is still in the realm of rumor. There's been no official formal announcement about an actual KOTOR film. Now, that being said, I don't know if I want a KOTOR film. Now, I wouldn't mind a film set in the era of KOTOR. That sounds cool to me. But an actual adaptation sounds awful. Either way, we'll see what comes of that. Because, shrug. I mean, at this point, I don't know how to predict Star Wars films. I mean, I liked Solo, so what the hell do I know? What else? We got the new Terminator. They dropped the new Terminator trailer, which... I don't even know what to say about that. I was thinking about it recently. I don't think I can call myself a Terminator fan. We talked about this before. It's like calling myself an Aliens fan, right? When you like 2 films out of like 6, are you a fan at that point? How about Predator? There's another one. But yeah, the Mass Effect movie. Oh my gosh. But yeah, they've got this Terminator film coming out, which we'll see. I mean, Cameron's back involved, so that might be something, because he's probably bringing his team with him, but I don't know how much of the original team is there, so I have no idea where they're going with this. I did actually watch the trailer. I'm not going to do an analysis of it. I just don't have much to say about it. It's okay. They're going back to the combination of the T-100 and the T-1000 idea, which they kind of did in Terminator 3, but they didn't really have the effects to do, I guess, because they never actually really did that. They are bringing back Miss Connor. That is admittedly kind of awesome. And not the fact that they're bringing the character back so much as the fact that they're bringing the actress back. I know that sounds like a weird distinction to make, but whatever. What else? Arnie's going to be in it, although in a fairly small role, so I'm not sure where they're going with that one. Let's see. Oh, yes. Lol, Chocolate Rob. I get that reference. I So before I say thank you, because I want to make sure that he understands that I mean it. He said his comment is hysterical. Not sure what to put this towards. I might save this for phase 2, which we're getting closer and closer towards. You're more than welcome to do that. I'll actually make a note here in the funding thing. I'll just put it down here. And just kind of leave that off to the side. Ow. Sorry, I've been kind of pushing myself a little bit lately. Moving takes a lot out of me. Well, that's not true. This move took a lot out of me. Words. God, I'm completely lost myself. Yeah, Kefka's just... He's just having fun down here. He's just enjoying. Are you there, Valerian? I don't think Valerian's there. I think he just popped... He did like a drive-by donation. It's like a drive-by, but like better in every way, because instead of bullets and death and pain, it's like, have some money! Okay, he is here. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you're here before I demonstrate myself before an empty crowd. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I never know what to say. It sounds so stupid, doesn't it? I never know what to say. I never know how to express gratitude. I've had this problem since I was a kid, where, my parents or my aunts or my uncles or my grandparents would get me a gift that I really, really liked, and I would have no idea how to express that to them. Because I am legitimately grateful. I don't know how to make that come out of this thing that I'm trapped in. This cage. I'm sure no one out there understands that perspective. So, thank you very, very much. Thank you. You know what? I've got it. We'll do it this way. Thank you. I can't do that. Yoshi. There you go. That's Yoshi for thank you. I do much appreciate your support. I really do. Especially right now. Because new place, new bills. Right now I'm technically double dipping on a couple of bills as well, because I still have to pay the next month's electricity and internet for the old place, in addition to the electricity and internet for the new place, and of course obviously rent. So yay. But you know how that goes. Anyways, thank you. Thank you very, very much. As I've mentioned, I've already put that over to the side. The words. So other random news. What do we got? God, let's move on. Let's move on before I fall into an apology loop, feedback loop. Terminator. So Burger King. Check this out. Where's my phone? That's actually kind of cool. How many of you have ever been to L.A.? I mean, obviously I have. I used to live down there in the Pomona area. Well, I'm glad you're stable next time. I really am, because well, everyone should be. But especially someone like you. Oh, come on. Yep, I know your ads exist. Let's go. Here we go. LA. After a successful test in Mexico City, Burger King will be delivering food to drivers caught in traffic in LA in what they have dubbed the Traffic Jam Whopper. The direct-to-car delivery service will use motorcyclists and bicyclists to deliver food to those stuck in traffic jams using real-time data to pinpoint Burger King fans on the road. Drivers are welcome to order a Burger King app from when they're within the delivery zone, which is roughly a 2-mile radius from the closest Burger King restaurant. In order to avoid safety and tickets, the app will use orders with voice commands. Orders in the test were limited to just the Whopper combo meal with bottled Pepsi or water. Once the order is placed, blah, 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 it takes about 15 minutes. Using further testing to expand the delivery. That is a cool idea. Let me make this clear. I am actually in favor of this because I've been to LA. Like, we all joke, right, about traffic jams? No. The traffic jams in LA are real. There is a reason why you leave 2 hours in advance to get to someplace that's 30 minutes down the road. That's a real problem. And I'm actually kind of with the idea of someone reaching out into this. I was actually talking to Dad about it too, Lord Dad. It's a market that's basically completely untapped. Now there's a reason it's untapped, and this is a very niche market. This can only hit certain areas, right? Because only certain areas have the level of traffic to justify it. But that is a very serious problem in that area, and this is something that might be able to help alleviate some of that. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see how many issues we have with it, because this is going to depend on the safety of the drivers and the specifics of exactly how they're going to work in it, and blah, 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 blah. We'll see. It is, however, past, as in already currently past tense, the legality side of things. So they've already gotten the proper licensing to do deliveries and send out bikes into an active highway situation, which is, if you don't know what I mean by that, let's just say that right now it's actually illegal for like just a regular pedestrian to get on a bike on a highway in LA. So, yeah. Public transport in the LA area is not good. It's kind of like the San Diego area, too. San Francisco does a lot better. But San Diego, LA, no, it's a mess. Anyways, we'll see where they go with that, but I thought it was worthy of mentioning. So Frozen mentioned something. This is also worthy of note. It's also in my random news thing. Endgame. In fact, actually, let's pull up the current record. Let's see where we're at right now. Let's pull up where we're at with Endgame, with Avengers Endgame, because Endgame has been slowly moving itself forward in records. In seeing where we get. So what we got here? Here we go. All-time records. So there's 3 major things that we keep track of for this. Domestic, adjusted for inflation, and worldwide. So domestic is United States sales only. Now, the world record. The country record for domestic is Force Awakens. If we're being honest, there's a pretty good chance Endgame will not beat that. So the domestic for Endgame is $785 million, which sounds like a lot, and it is. It's actually a decent chunk ahead of Avatar, which is the previous number 2 holder. But Force Awakens is in the lead with $936 million. They're not going to catch Force Awakens. That was such a unique confluence. Episode 7 just smashed that record. Nevertheless, Endgame has basically solidified its number 2 slot. Now, the adjusted for inflation thing, we've actually talked about this, and why Gone with the Wind is never going to be usurped in the adjusted for inflation thing. However, Endgame is actually number 22 on the adjusted for inflation list, and that's really good. Like, that is astonishingly good. To give you an idea here, the only other film within the last 10 years that has come anywhere close to that in the top list there is Star Wars Force Awakens, which is actually sitting at number 11, adjusted for inflation. So, Endgame getting up to the number 22 slot is astonishing. Then we've got the big one, the worldwide. Now, the highest grossing film worldwide is Avatar, which actually, if I'm being honest, actually kind of irritates me. We know why. Avatar had a fairly long release schedule. It was one of the first films that had 3D tickets, so it had a few factors going for it, regardless of the quality of the film. But it's always kind of irritated me that Avatar has just sat on the top list for about 10 years now, actually. I'm glad you liked the KOTOR stuff. Nevertheless, Endgame might actually pass it. This is the realm of maybe. So the number 3 slot is held by Titanic at 2.18 billion. Force Awakens is 2 billion, Infinity War is 2 billion, etc., etc. Endgame is up to 2.65, Avatar is at 2.78. So that's not a small hill. They still have a decent chunk. That's, what is that? It's 138.3, we'll just go and be specific about this, $138.3 million in order to climb up over Avatar. That is not a small amount. But I hope it gets there. God, I hope it gets there. Not only because I think it should, but because we'd finally get Avatar off the number 1 slot. And if we're being honest with ourselves, as I mentioned, Avatar was kind of a unique situation, which means the only things that are going to surpass something like Avatar are other unique situations or really, really, really good films. And Endgame kind of fits both categories. So I'm really hoping that Endgame manages to knock that out of the park. You know, the conclusion of, 22 films or something like that? Anyways. What else we got? So there's the Terminator. I'm looking at my notes here. Burger King, I mentioned that. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is coming out soon. Thank you very, very much, Uchiha. As ever, much appreciate those subs. Thank you very much. I'm going to go and jot that down really quick. To Cyberpunk. But yeah, Modern Warfare is coming out soon. I hate video games sometimes. That's not true. Oh, I mean, it is true, but I hate video game naming. I really, really do. Because it's literally, it's Call of Duty Modern Warfare is the name of the game that's coming out. Now, that will make it a unique title, because it was actually Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and then it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and now we're getting Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So it is technically a new title. It's just, God, I hate it when they pull this crap. Everything does this. Even franchises I love do this. In fact, I think one of the only franchises that hasn't done this is all the Nintendo stuff, because Nintendo doesn't do this. But everyone else does this. Anyways. Whatever. Whatever. Might actually be good, who knows. The last one I liked was Infinite Warfare, but the team who basically got canned. Good morning, Baron. Star Ocean 1. So, okay. Back in the day, this is several years ago now, Star Ocean 1 and 2 got remakes on the PSP. I actually own those remakes. Never got around to playing them, but I do actually own those, and I was curious because I liked Star Ocean 1 and I loved Star Ocean 2. The Star Ocean 1 PSP remake is getting a port to the PS4 and the Switch, which is awesome. The only thing that can make that better is if it was also getting ported to PC, which it is not, to my knowledge. So that's awesome. It also means we might get the Star Ocean 2 PSP remake ported to Switch. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I get every bit of that correct there. So that's something that could be awesome. Who knows? Yeah, I know, Max Time. Whatever. You know. I mean, I'm all in favor of Switch ports, but I am also all in favor of PS4 ports and Xbox ports and PC ports. So, woo! Energy hour, whoa! So yeah, woo. Oh yeah, Galaxy 2 is coming out. I don't know a lot of details about it. So, Galaxy 2 is GOG's latest attempt to update their interface. They actually have a storefront, which is, it's alright. I mostly support GOG because I support GOG. I actually legitimately like what they do, and I tend to prefer, like, if I have a choice between Steam or GOG, I will take GOG over Steam. And then I'll take Steam. I suppose this is a good time to mention something, so I keep using the word bipartisan inaccurately. That's on me. I want to apologize for that. But you might wonder, what does that have to do with GOG or Steam? Well, it has to do with the Epic Store. I'm basically not going to talk about the Epic Store anymore, because it has become too partisan, is the correct terminology there. In other words, it's getting to, you have to be extremely for it, or you have to be extremely against it. And there's no in between. And I don't like that. And I've gotten tired of bringing it up. So, I'm not going to anymore. Because I don't want my comment section to dissolve into a yelling match between the two of them. Although they did dox a guy last week. Anyways, so that was just a mistake. I'm not going to hold that against them. Yeah. Point being, whatever. What else? Is that it? So we've got GOG, we've got Epic, we've got... Is that everything? I think that's all our random news. I don't think I'm missing anything. So let's go ahead and move to our next topic, which is tariffs, because I know you guys love it when I talk about economics, right? That's what you're here for, is the economics runner. Don't worry, I won't Alexa it up, unless I feel like it would be funny. Let's see, timestamp. I'll just guess here. My timestamps are wildly inaccurate. I don't actually know why. What's the voot? Hang on. Basically, I want you to listen to a audio file and tell me which version of the audio file you like best. So I'll go ahead and mention that again before we move over. So here's the audio file. Make sure to listen to it before you vote. And here's the vote. And Fallen Order will probably be good, yes. Economics. Let's talk about tariffs. For those of you not aware, and I know what you're thinking, Lore, why are you bringing up the tariff war between China and the United States? Because it will directly affect us, because we are gamers. Okay? So this is something that will actually impact us. Let's talk about tariffs. So, tariff is actually kind of an umbrella term for several different things, including both import and export customs. And it's a very simple to understand concept. It is an additional amount of money that is pulled by the government from companies that are importing or exporting goods to and from a country, right? A very simple concept. Here's the really weird thing about tariffs. In a vacuum, what do you think about tariffs right now, before I go any further? I like Shadow Machine's answer there. It is a literal form of taxation, yes. I like Dakota's answer, too. Part of the reason I bring this up is tariffs have changed what they mean very significantly within the last about 400 years or so. Roughly the time at which tariffs kind of entered the new phase was about 200 years ago. So, back in the day, which is a Wednesday, by the way, tariffs were a way of making money for a government. In fact, they were one of the only reliable ways of making money for a government. You ever wonder why certain nations or certain city-states rose to power and prominence? In an overwhelming number of cases, it was because they sat on a trade lane. Right? I mean, you've heard of the Spice Road and the tea routes and all that fun stuff, right? Think about it. So, tariffs were basically the income for governments for a fairly large chunk of history. Now, I know that varies, and I know that's not true for every country, but that was the basic purpose of the tariff concept. See, the thing is, though, the reason that worked back then is because it was the only choice. If you wanted tea from China, you had to pay the tariffs. So people did. not because they wanted to, but because the market could withstand it, and because they had no alternative. Fast forward to about 400 or so years ago, to about 200 years ago. That's the era in which the world really started becoming a global entity. That's why I give it a nice 200-year gap there. This is, of course, just my opinion, historically speaking. But there's a nice 200-year gap, in my opinion, where the world, all the nations of the world kind of stopped being individual entities and focused instead on a slightly different approach. Which brings me to my next point. One of the big ideas at the time was they wanted to allow for... What, Henson? It's a 200-year gap. Minus 400 to minus 200. Think about it. Anyways, it was this period of time which all the countries were starting to become more international, in other words. Trying to actually become connected. This is also, funnily enough, an period in economics in which most countries were trying to do, and I can't remember the official term on this, but basically trying to rely less on other nations. See, this is why I go back 400 years instead of just 200 years, because the whole we need to get tea from China thing kind of started shifting into why don't we just produce our own tea? Why don't we just go ahead and produce our own oil? Why don't we just produce our own aluminum, etc., etc.? And there was a lot of move on a global scale from many nations, especially the big European powers at the time, to push towards self-sufficiency. This is also kind of the direction in which led most of the wars of that era, too, was nations who were basically attempting to pull themselves into that and failing at it and needing such and such, right? Mercantilism? I think you're right, Nils Wager. I think that's the term there. So the nations of the world, which at this point weren't even nations, if we're being honest, but I don't have a better term here. So the powers of the world were kind of moving towards that until about 200 years ago. Then they did basically a complete 180, which has been shifting from about 200 years ago until basically now, where instead of trying to make every nation produce their own stuff, what has been attempted is trying to interconnect each nation more directly so that it is basically less of a hassle and easier to trade across nations. Thus, the ideal, of course, being that every nation would have a relatively equal amount of imports and exports, each one functioning as effectively a state in a greater whole. Now, there's a lot of problems with that, obviously, and as Barron points out, it's not working in practice. If you look up the import-export ratio, it's completely imbalanced in virtually every major country on the planet. But that is the point we're at now. Thus, finally getting back to my point, sorry for the little history lesson, getting back to my point, though, in the last 200 years or so, the usage of tariffs, getting back to that, is all about trying to exert political influence on another nation. Now, this is interesting. This is an interesting concept, because economists can't agree on anything, right? Like, everything I tell you, economically speaking, I pretty much always have to affix my opinion onto it, because nobody can agree on anything, except this. This is one of the extremely rare things that economists will agree on, and that's that tariffs being raised is almost universally bad, even for the country raising the tariffs. Now, there is a little bit of gray area there on whether or not tariffs should exist at all, because that's a debatable. But everyone, like virtually everyone, agrees that tariffs going up leads to a direct, literal impact on the overall, there's a term for it, basically the social welfare, economically speaking, of the country going down in direct reaction to this. This is because, and I'm going to use cigarettes as my perfect example here, this is because if you... I'm sorry, I just realized this is going to sound so stupid. I imagine most of you are smarter than this, but I'm explaining this because I've heard people who don't get this. If you tax a thing as a government, if you, the government, say, we're going to raise all the price of cigarettes, and we're going to make it so that you have to pay these fees and you have to pay these taxes, guess who pays those taxes? Because it's not the company you're taxing. I mean, technically it is, but they directly pass those taxes over to their products. 1-to-1. Or 1-to-2 or whatever. But you get my point, right? They just straight pass those increased taxes or there's increased tariffs onto the customer. That is literally what has always happened with that. This is another one of those non-debatables, because this is just such a common thing. Which brings me to the China and U.S. situation, because now this is interesting. This is interesting because I don't want to point fingers, because I hate doing this, but everything in the world is talking about how Trump is going to screw over multiple industries by raising tariffs with China. And I agree. But no one's talking about how China has already moved to raise tariffs against us. Like, nobody's mentioning that. Which is really weird, because they've already done that. Like, that's in the past as of this point. Trump's raising tariffs is in direct reaction to that. At least, he is attempting to. I say attempting to because it actually hasn't happened yet. There's been no actual increase in tariffs yet. On our side. Yeah, that's another one, Aethel. Would the U.S. sell China? I could pull up a list if you want. The U.S. buys and sells tons of things to China. Mostly on the industrial level. This brings me to my old point, that this is a political tool. That's why I gave you that little history lesson. Because tariffs are no longer a viable economic method of increasing income. Tariffs, all that tariffs do is raise the price for the customers and try to force more internalization when it comes to product production, supply, transit, etc., and trying to specifically push other things out. And that's in an interconnected, intergalactic, international world. That's basically a universally bad thing, like I mentioned earlier. This is a political move, not an economic one, is what I'm trying to say. Now, yeah, that's true, Tesvir. The U.S. has a long history for the last 200 years of basically trying to make their point economically in order to affect things politically. Now, the market's already taken a hit on this one. By that, I mean, I should clarify, the stock market has already taken a hit on this one. That being stated, I don't actually know if this will go into effect, but if it does, I guarantee you it's going to be bad. Several companies have actually already talked about how they will have to raise their prices on certain things as a direct reaction to this. Like the PS4, for example, or the Switch, or any Nintendo game, or whatever. This is why I say this affects us. Because if you see things take a price hike sometime within the next probably 2 years, I'd say, that will be the direct reason why. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, hang on, why would they care about China stuff? Nintendo, to use again a direct example, most of their equipment is now produced in China. So they actually manufacture their crap in China, because that's always a wonderful thing. And I don't even want to talk about what's going on with the farming thing. Valerian knows more about that than me. I'm only passively aware of the fact that of the farming thing. That's just... I don't understand your question, Roaring. What are you talking about? Unless you mean the movie thing, in which case, yeah, we'll see. Okay, Colgrim. Well, thank you for voting. Hello, hate Disney. How are things? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I do agree with something. I think Tesvir said this earlier. I do agree that as of the state we're in right now, and the best part is nobody's going to sit down and do this, but I do agree that if we had the power to just get everyone down and just be like, all right, hey, guys, let's just chat. Hang on. Wait, everyone. There we go. Okay, everyone. Okay, we need to rebalance this, because right now the international global market is wonky as hell. You can quote me on that. That's my official economic opinion of the global market right now. It is wonky as hell. We'll see what happens. Oh, to be clear, by the way, I don't think the United States, because that's called what it is, increasing tariffs on China is a good solution, but it might actually be a necessary solution. Make of that what you will. Yes, that's the technical term. So let's talk about slightly less depressing things. Hopefully. Only the person holding the pencil can talk. I've had to do that in debate teams. Let's talk about Picard. Now, he's aged more gracefully than I have. Yeah, let's talk about... we had a Picard teaser, and we've already had some photos on the set and stuff like that. Woo! They're making a Picard show. They've already begun filming as of now. I think they're several weeks into it at this point. The film's obviously going to be all about the Picard. I don't understand that question, Baron. I can't talk like a Protoss in real life, if that's what you're asking. But yeah, so... the reason this is an actual topic instead of just being a random news thing is because I am amazingly hesitant about this. Don't get me wrong, Patrick Stewart's awesome and has consistently been awesome. However, I have to point something out. I heard one person say, this is almost verbatim, it will be a good show because Patrick Stewart's in it. To which I have to say, the Emoji Movie. For those of you not aware, there's a movie called The Emoji Movie, which is exactly as awful as it sounds, which has Patrick Stewart in it. Now, yeah, it's true. He was also in X-Men 3. He was also in Nemesis. Yeah, no, the point is... I don't know what to make of this. Because, on the one hand, Code of Honor had Patrick Stewart. There you go. We've done it. We peaked. Finally, if this music is playing during this. But no, I have tremendous respect for the man. He is, in my opinion, one of the greatest actors of this era. And I mean that sincerely. I really do. He was a theatrical actor who was a fantastic character actor. And he's just kind of an awesome person in general. I do think that doing something with Picard now is a good move. Why? Because Patrick Stewart is like 80. I know that's horribly cynical, but it's still true. I would rather get something with Picard while we still have Patrick Stewart. So, at this point, this might be one of those any better than none kind of situations. That's point one. Point two... I've actually mentioned this before. I actually think it would be better if we were doing an audio thing instead of like visual effect thing instead of live action. But regardless of that, the next thing is this is going to be taking place after Nemesis. Now that's another thing I'm in favor of because this is one of the only things that's actually going past Nemesis. For those of you not aware of the Star Trek continuity, there's like DS9, and then that terminated, and then Voyager kept going for a few seasons, and then that terminated, and then Nemesis is like a year or two, I think it's 2 years, after that. And Nemesis is the furthest along thing in the Star Trek timeline we've had, unless you count STO, which I do, admittedly. But whether STO counts is still something that's in the air. So, assuming STO does not count, Nemesis is the farthest in the timeline we've ever gone. Which leads us to Picard. Now, this gets wonky because we're not actually even 100% sure if this is our Picard. Because there are alternate Picards before to be taken in mind. Now, to my knowledge, this has not been set in stone one way or the other. Because they're still kind of trying to insist that Discovery is the prime timeline, even though it doesn't fit at all. So, we'll see? Because this is just a mess. Let's just summarize. Because this whole thing is just a mess of rights issues and CBS being dumb and Paramount being dumb and whatever. So we'll see. I don't actually know exactly where we're going with this. However, we do have to discuss something about Star Trek Discovery. We have to. And for that, I'm going to throw up this really quick. Just for this bit, don't worry. I cannot discuss this without spoiling Discovery Season 2. I can't. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to mute me until this goes away. just come back in a few minutes or whatever. But I'm about to spoil Star Trek Discovery Season 2. Spoilers. Spoilers. Have a good day at work. McKay. Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Spoilers. Yoshi, how do we tell them that there are spoilers? Wait, really? Okay, well, apparently the best way to inform you guys of spoilers is to throw my rag over the webcam. Whoop, I missed! No! There we go, okay. Spoilers! No, okay, really though. Damn it, Baron, hang on. So, okay, here's the thing, Baron. I'm not going to link you the vote. I'm going to link you the thing you're voting on, though. Here's the thing you're voting on. When you've listened to it, I'll link you the vote. Or you can listen to it later. But that's the thing you're voting on. I think we're done. I think that's plenty of warning. So at the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, they warp to the future after Nemesis. In fact, I believe it's after Picard, although I don't remember off the top of my head. But this is relevant when it comes to Picard. Because this now means that there are, actually 3, separate Star Trek titles which are trying to move the timeline forward past Nemesis. Now, oh, sorry, it's 8 centuries. Okay, so they're right. It's going to be well after Nemesis. Now, this is relevant because this is still relevant, I swear. I was pretty sure Discovery was after Picard, and I'm right. I was wrong about the timeline there. This is relevant because it means we are now going to get to see exactly how well they managed to keep their timeline straight, or if they're going to bother at all. Because they have already, even in the teaser, referenced things in Picard that would necessarily be a part of the history of Discovery in the 31st century or whatever. Right? This also means that they could completely divest. See, here's the problem. I say problem. Here's something I don't like about Star Trek. In Star Trek, they have Type 3 time travel, almost universally. And what that means is all the different stuff that happens makes all these different timelines, and they all go branching out, right? Now, for the most part, that actually doesn't really come up. It's only really a big thing because there are 3 primary technically 4, but let's ignore that for a moment. 3 primary timelines when it comes to Star Trek. There's the Prime timeline, there's the Kelvin timeline, and there's the Mirror Universe. And that's it, right? Now, for the most part, these work reasonably well, up until Discovery. There's obviously a ton of continuity issues in Star Trek as a whole, but that's more endemic of the concept of Star Trek, not the 3 timelines concept. What we could see here is Discovery branching out to this, Picard branching out to this, and the new kids show branching out like this. This could cause issues. And that is ultimately my point here, and probably the single biggest reason why I am de-invested in the Picard show. Because if this is just another timeline Picard, or if this is something that has nothing to do with what happens in Discovery in the future, or if this is something that has absolutely no consequence of anything that happened prior to now, then why am I watching this? Why do I care? Now, I know, man. God, guys, apparently nobody listening to me. Remember when I did this, and then I did this, and then I got rid of this? That's because this takes a while to explain. There are 4 main timelines, but for the most part, there's only 3 that matter, okay? Anyways, so where was I? So we have a problem where this is also technically the 5th one, but let's not even get into that one. We have this problem of trying to reach to nostalgia's sake, bringing back Patrick Stewart, calling the show Picard, and yet the possibility exists that the show might not even have anything to do with anything of the events of Picard or the shows that we care about. Like, I know that Huthor would absolutely disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But to me, this feels like a contradiction in terms. It's not the fact that Star Trek has multiple timelines and I dislike it, although that's true. They're specifically gearing this towards, this is Picard. Ergo, of all of the shows, this is the one that should be most connected to previous Star Trek, to TNG, and to the events of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. My opinion. But if you're going to call it Picard, if you're going to bring back Patrick Stewart, if you're going to focus this all around that entire event of what happened to the great legendary captain, you need to have it be connected, in my opinion. Does that make sense? That's why I'm actually bothered by this more than anything else that's going on right here. And one of the bigger reasons why this is making me go, huh? In addendum to that, there is one other thing I have to mention. So for those of you not aware of the behind-the-scenes thing, this is the other thing that gives me problems here. The other thing here is there are... How do I phrase this? There's budget issues. Let's just summarize. There are budget issues with the Picard show. They do not have the full budget of what a television show of the modern era should have. This is fact. We know this. This is already a thing that's set in stone. Now, that's not necessarily endemic of a show. That could lead to this still being a good show. Okay? That we might be able to work this out. But that's going to cause issues, especially for people who are used to Discovery, which does have a full budget, or any other modern television, which has full budget. Anybody coming from, God, I don't even know what shows are really big right now other than Game of Thrones, to a low-budget Star Trek show, there's going to be like that automatic... Now, hear me out for a second. People are very judgmental, like we all know this. And if you have an amateur production, people are just going to be automatically less inclined to watch it. If you're watching a guy in a suit in front of a green screen effect of a background that's kind of moving, you are more likely, statistically speaking, people are more likely, I shouldn't say you, people are more likely to watch that than a guy with kind of a disheveled hair in his work uniform sitting in a cube farm talking into a laptop. Yeah, I've been linked that like 6 times this week, Venters, but thank you. So, this then leads to... Disco. This is part of my point. People are automatically judgmental on immediate impression, especially nowadays, when time is such a limited factor for most people who are in their adult years. So, I'm worried that this might turn people off of Star Trek and make people like, what is this crap? However, I do have to showcase the opposite side of that. So, for those of you not aware, there's a term called a bottle show. And I forgive me for repeating this, I know a lot of you know this. A bottle show is when you specifically are trying to reduce the cost of an episode by limiting what you do with it. Very few guest stars, no special effects shots, existing sets, etc. All of the things that raise the prices of producing television are chopped away and it's kept within the bottle. Now the thing is, Star Trek, historically speaking, tends to be really good with bottle shows. Now, I don't know if this is because it's Star Trek or because they just kind of keep getting lucky, but a lot of bottle shows allow the writers and the actors to really focus on the character element, and that's where some of this stuff tends to really go, right? Which leads me to Picard. If Picard is going to be a bottle series, as long as they keep the focus, the really zoomed-in focus, down on Picard and on whatever they're actually doing with this whole traumatic episode he's been through, and why he left Starfleet and why he's an admiral now and blah, 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 that might actually work out. Because, well, budget is important, but not necessary. It's not critical. That being said, I do want to say one other quick thing here really quick. What the hell event are they referencing? Like, I get that that's the point. But maybe it's just me, but they're like, you were the one, and you lost faith in us. You lost faith in Starfleet. This man has been through the Borg. I'm sorry. Picard actually did have a character arc about the Borg violating and destroying him internally as far and as hard as it's possible to do, and forcing him to turn against and kill many of his own people. Oh, kill and worse, actually, sorry. He's already been through one of the worst things a person can go through on a deeply intimate and personal level. I look at that, and my first thought was, oh, bull. Now, the destruction of Romulus is probably it. You're probably right, guys. But again, really? That's the big thing that makes him lose faith? I don't know. I find that to be an interesting... no, let me rephrase that. I find that to be a bad jumping off point. The only thing that I've been able to mentally harangue around that is if maybe he finds out about the Vulcan Science Academy's involvement in the destruction of Hobus, or whatever it was called. That's all I got on that one. So, Picard. Woo. I don't want to talk about this topic, I'll be honest. So the World Health Organization, yesterday? Day before? Very recently, sat down and was like, hey, gaming disorder has been added to the list of worldwide recognized illnesses. The 11th revision of the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, also known as ICD-11. This revision includes adding gaming disorder as an illness. This is the definition and characteristic of gaming disorder, and I quote, a pattern of persistent or recurrent gaming behavior, digital gaming or video gaming, which may be online, i.e. over the internet, or offline, manifested by 1. Impaired control over gaming, e.g. onset, frequency, intensity, duration, termination, and context. 2. Increased priority given to gaming to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other life interests and daily activities. And 3. Continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. The behavior pattern is of sufficient severity to result in significant impairment of personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Now, the reason I don't want to talk about this is I'm going to get flack for this, but I'm just going to be blunt with you guys because being honest is kind of my thing. This is bullcrap. Oh, don't mistake me. There are people who have obsessive issues. Fixative issues is what I like to think of that as. People who focus on things too much. People who get obsessive about things. People who have recurring, interest in something. Blah, 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 blah. But the problem is, this is... The problem is, I don't think gaming disorder exists. I think that people who have obsessive mentalities exist. I think that people who have a difficulty controlling themselves exist, although I don't think that's a mental disorder. I think that people who are Savicom exist, although that's debatable too. But my point being, I don't think gaming disorder exists. I don't. For the record, I have talked to the side of my family that is on the medical side about this issue. 100% of them have all said the same basic thing. No. They have talked about, again, the idea that there are people who have fixative issues. There are people who have addictive personalities, I think is the term. In other words, someone who has a mental inclination towards getting locked into something to an excessive degree, right? All of that is absolutely true. But there's no such thing as a gaming disorder on top of that. Gaming disorder is simply a byproduct of that, which leads me to why this irritates me. I'm going to quote Pax here for a second. How long do you think it's going to be before someone says, yeah, no, I've got serious issues, man. I just can't stop playing WoW. I'm going to need a welfare check. Now, again, granted, I don't know how much that's actually a real thing or whatever, but I mean, right? It's kind of huh? I mean, I play video games roughly 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for my job. Do I have to sign myself up for this? Well, no, of course I don't, because, going back to the definition there, increased priority given to gaming to the extent that gaming takes precedence over life interests and daily activities. No, I cook, clean. I'm going to see my sis and family over the next week. I'm going to see a movie next weekend, too. I'm looking forward to that. I take showers. I do the laundry. I clean my house. I have a life. Well, I don't have a life, but I do have the ability to take care of myself outside of playing games 8 hours a day. The other problem, though, is the gray area. The gray... I shave, yeah, no. The gray area is what really bugs me about this most, because... Well, okay. Let me go ahead and get real with you guys for a second. How many of you guys remember the or not the OCD, the ADHD craze? How many of you remember that? Because I do. The ADHD craze, attention deficit, I forget the rest of it, disorder. It was like South Park did the best take on that. Of course, because South Park always just has this weird talent for nailing social issues just perfectly. Hyperactive, that's it, hyperactive, thank you. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They were like, there's a South Park thing, and it was exaggerated, but only slightly. Okay, we're going to go ahead and see this. Let's see here. All right, so how many of you kids are going to focus on such and such, or this and this? Oh my God, you can't pay attention to this. They're just kids. I actually personally knew people who were being diagnosed with ADHD incorrectly, and were being given Ritalin for it, and were being given drugs for ADHD when they did not have it. That was a problem. And this is what irritates me about this, because I am worried, obviously this just happened like yesterday, but I am worried that this is going to lead to another round of whoo, just like the ADD thing or the ADHD thing did. What effects did the... Oh, God, dude. So I actually remember a specific conversation with my friend Rob. I've probably mentioned him a few times. And he was just doing this. No joke. It was actually kind of scary. I was worried about him. How worried was I? Well, at the time, my mom was still a practicing pharmacist. And I was like, could you look into this script? Could you check this one for me, please? What's his name? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yeah. But you get my point. There is a gray area here, and the gray area is what worries me, really. Ignoring the fact that I don't think gaming disorder exists, as I've already mentioned. Let's just move past that. I'm worried about the gray area. I'm worried about people who just don't have the self-control. Just don't have the motivation to be self-controlled. Because that's the thing, too. A lot of people tend to forget that. There are plenty of people who have more than the ability to learn or grow or act or do who don't have any reason to. And thus people, medically speaking, tend to say, well, you have a problem. No, I mean, no, they don't. I mean, yes, they obviously have a problem, but their problem is lack of motivation. You should be trying to help them get motivated, not drugging them. Sorry, this kind of pisses me off, because like I said, this actually hit close to home for me back during the ADHD craze, and obviously, I kind of keep a finger on the pulse of this whole thing. Oh yeah, by the way, fun fact here. Scroll down a little bit. Is this the page? No, actually it's this one. Here it is. The ESA and the IGDA both, and members of the medical community, sorry, I forgot that one, have been pushing back against this ruling, saying, no. No. Now, I like this quote. Forgive me. The WHO's creation of a gaming disorder has the potential to do significant and serious harm to people who use games as a coping mechanism for anxiety, depression, and stress, and may encourage doctors to address symptoms but not underlying illnesses. Bingo. That's what worries me. And for the first time, I think in my life, I'm actually on the side of the actual gaming lobbyist group. What the hell? What kind of world am I living in? Anyways. Yeah, exactly, Baron. Like, am I in Bizarro Land? Real quick, EA's still terrible, right? Oh, I'm sure, Golvi. Just like they did with ADHD, if you remember. Because that craze is long gone at this point. One of the things that my sis, who is studying to be a teacher, has actually had to go through is actually learning how to... basically, she has actually had to take psychological classes in order to be able to learn how to reach out to kids who might have leanings towards certain deficiencies or mental illnesses or whatever, and how to identify whether or not they do. Because it is now her job as a teacher to actually say, hey, I think such and such, I think Huthor over there might have autism or might have ADHD, and then forward that to the medical side of things for them to actually get them checked out. That's actually a thing now. And I'm kind of in favor of that, although, you know, it's just not talking about the parent side of that, but whatever. Yeah, so that's a thing. I think what I find funniest about this... Let's give you some dates. What is this? This is July? No, this is May. May, yep. This is May of 2019, right? Gaming disorder was proposed to the WHO, the World Health Organization, in December of 2017. The actual definition, the one I read for you earlier, was proposed in June last year. Anyways. That's all I got on that one. Yeah, the Who. I hear they do good music. Oh, my goodness. Listen, the Fortnites, they're just you don't even know, man. Alright, let's get to some Tumblr questions. Where are we at? What's the first one? The new Jedi Order one. Ah, okay. So, I'm actually going to read this one out loud because this actually made me laugh a bit. The fork knives. Yeah, no kidding, Colvar. Anyways. So, you remember when my door was kicked down by George R.R. Martin? So I got that sucker fixed. It's there, okay. Sit down, I start recording my mini nations. And then suddenly George Lucas kicks down the door with a time machine in hand. Okay, first thing, I need to fix that door because, god damn it, people. But second of all, he explains to you, you were going to go back in time and fix the new Jedi Order books. Now, for those who don't remember, that was the whole Darth Caedus story arc, okay? That was the stuff immediately after the Vong, I think. Pretty sure that was after. Anyways, I actually don't know off the top of my head. I don't know post Hand of Thrawn all that well. So you have to go back and fix the new Jedi Order books. The rules are simple. The Vong do have to still be involved. The main characters have to be in it, including Jason. Anakin does have to die, and that's it. I was right. So, how do you fix the new Jedi Order series? Now, for those of you... Yeah, I know, right, Zira? It's weird. For those of you who don't actually remember, the new Jedi Order was functionally one of the last pushes of the EU before the prequels really started pushing the EU towards the prequel era, and the EU started segueing into the AU. While there is stuff, canonically speaking, after the new Jedi Order in the timeline... Okay, maybe he means both, because he's clearly referencing Caedus. So let's go and merge the Legacy and the New Jedi Order together for this one. But it was the point I was trying to get to is this is basically the last thing, timeline-wise, not counting like the one Sith and all that crap, before we switched over to the new timeline, to the AU. So, the Vong have to be involved. You know, all the main characters have to be in it. Anakin still has to die. Go. How do you fix that era? Now, the Vong being in it automatically makes me say, George, why? The only way I could say that this would be cool at all is if we completely redid the Vong. And I mean that sincerely. I've said it before and I've said it again. Not only do I not like the Vong, because I don't. But I've never thought the Vong actually worked, just from a purely objective perspective. The Vong, I've said this before and I'll say this again, the Vong were the GM sitting down and saying, okay, your party is a level 3 bard, a level 6 fighter, and a level 12 cleric. It's the dumbest party in the world, but whatever. I'm going to sit down and make a enemy who is specifically designed to defeat you. And that's what the Vong were. Now, that by itself, okay, that kind of works. The problem is everything else. So I'm seeing some ideas here. Keep the New Republic. Don't switch over to the Galactic Alliance. 4 white mages would never work, Henson. It is the opposite of the Deus Ex Machina. You're right. It's the Diabolos Ex Machina. But that is the Vong. So, okay, you want something that can specifically contest the Force and the galactic powers and blah, 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 blah. Okay, sure, I guess. Do we have to have them be organic pain mongers who are religious zealots and have gravity weapons? Like, can we redo that? So, and I've talked many times about how I'd redo the Vong. So let's just say redo the Vong, put that there's a bullet point and move past that. Now, I do like the Remnant allying with the Republic. I just don't think the New Republic needs to go away. Because remember, that's a thing that happened. The New Republic just it was like Prussia turning into Germany. I know that's a weird parallel, but hear me out. Because the New Republic functionally stopped existing and became the Galactic Alliance. I'm fine with the idea of the Remnant allying with the New Republic. In fact, that's something I've been pushing for years at that point. Pretty much ever since Palaeon started re-entering the story. I also like the idea of the Chiss being more involved. Because the Chiss are awesome, first of all. But also because the Ascendancy, like, they've already built up to the Ascendancy literally dealing with these kind of problems for years. Oh yeah, speaking of which, I wouldn't have the Vong come from another galaxy. That's always kind of bothered me a little bit. Because, to me, it felt like an unnecessary step. They talk many times in the prequel stuff, in the EU stuff leading up to, there's quite a few hints of some horrible doom thing out on the rims. They even mentioned that in KOTOR 1. Remember that? Or maybe it was KOTOR 2, but it's one of them in the KOTORs. Have them just be part of the unknown regions. Have them be a horrible death doom thing out there that the Chiss are aware of and has been kind of in conflict with and holding back for some time. And Shazam, right? Yeah, the Hand of Thrawn was literally supposed to help deal with this problem. Why are they coming from another galaxy? Anyways. Basically, yes, Plutonia. Percentage-wise, the overwhelming majority of the Star Wars galaxy is unmapped. I shouldn't say overwhelming. It's closer to like 30 or 40%. But it's a big chunk. There's a lot of space. That's just... So, first change. Now, Anakin still has to die. Well, that sucks. In case you don't know who I'm talking about, I'm referring to Anakin Skywalker. That doesn't help, does it? Luke's kid. Let's just summarize that. Yeah, once you get out past Bakura, there's just set them out there. Anyways, sorry. Getting off topic. Looking at my notes here. So, was it Anakin Solo? Gosh, I actually don't remember now. I think you're right, though. I think... Well, that doesn't... Hang on. Let me look something up here. Hang on. I think I'm getting two characters confused. I am getting two characters confused. Sorry. So apparently I'm referring to the third child of Leia and Han, not the child of Mara and Luke. My bad, guys. My bad. Because for some reason, they called him Anakin and they called the other one Ben. Whatever. My apologies. Getting them confused. Like I said, I don't actually know this era all that well because I hated it. I've only read it all through once. So, okay. So Anakin still has to die, a.k.a. Han and Leia's kid. All right. Um, where's my notes? Okay, so... God, I don't know. I don't actually have any ideas for that, if I'm being completely honest. And, of course, pushing Jason down the dark path is... I've been very vocal about how I don't like Darth Caedus. I've been extremely vocal about that. I even answered a question about that not too long ago on my Tumblr. I suppose if we had to make Jason go down the dark path, what I would probably do is and I know this is cliched, but if we're being honest, this has never actually been done. I would actually do the thing I've been wanting them to do for a long time. I would basically have them pull an Anakin Skywalker, on Jason Solo. The idea of making it so that he is pushed towards the bad dark side, the dark side without control, the dark side without reason, the dark side without morality, because people keep telling him how horrible it is, and him having a natural inclination towards it. Make him in tune with the dark side, similar to how Anakin was. And then have people constantly tell him how terrible and horrible he is, and how much that he needs to be awful, right? Like, oh, God, you're a horrible person, you need to fix this, right? Yeah, again, kind of repeating the Anakin thing. Now, the idea here would be the concept that it is the teachings that and the incorrect responses that push him towards that, rather than the dark side being bad. And, of course, Anakin's death probably wouldn't help that any. Because what I would probably do is I would have, and I don't know how this actually happens, so forgive me if I'm just repeating the books. It's been a long time since I read these books, and again, I only read them once through. I would have it so that Anakin died in a way that if Jason had reached out to the dark side to save him, he wouldn't have died. Thus, leading Jason to fundamentally presume that people are flat out wrong about the dark side and about what's wrong with that. And so that would basically be the wedge. Put that in there and shove him in that direction. But if we have to include the Vong, God, I don't know. I don't know what to do with the Vong. I suppose, what would you guys do with the Vong? Let me just ask you, flat out. You have to include the Vong. Let's say they're different. Okay. What do you do with them? How do you approach them from a storytelling perspective? Do you have them Vongiform? Coruscant? God, that's still the dumbest freaking... I know we've already got literal space magic in Star Wars, but Vong forming? Really? I actually don't know, Malachar. I wasn't following a lot of the behind the scenes at the time. That's a good question. Since this is by definition an EU thing, we'd have to go with the EU and one of the EU definitions, Loner. Now that being said, Huthor mentions the idea of the dark side being inherently corruptive, which is one of, I think, is two of the various... God, use your brain, Laura. Two of the various interpretations of the Force. So the dark side being an inherently corruptive force is something that's possible. Now, I don't like that personally, but if we were to include the dark side as an inherently corruptive force... See, I'd have to completely redo everything I just said about Jason. Because if the dark side is inherently corruptive, then the only way for that to work would be for him to be, to extend a metaphor a little bit, him to be poisoned with the dark side and never cured of it, right? So the dark side just kind of festers and grows and swells until he becomes Darth Doom, Death Guy. Why am I opposed to the Vong in general? Because the only way the Vong work for me is if you completely rewrite them. Like, keep the external force thing. Okay, I'm with that. Keep them as like a fundamental change of the status quo. I'm with that. But these are the only 2 points I'm with when it comes to the Vong. And this could apply to a lot of different things, right? Like, we could add, like, 7 more different bullet points to the Vong in order to actually define the Vong. These two are actually fairly minor points about the Vong overall. Darth Doom Death Guy. I mean, you're right. The biotech, I mean, I hate biotech in general. I do. I'm just going to be upfront about that. So if you gave me the writing, I would not make it biotech. I could tolerate biotech if I had to. I wouldn't write it. If you hold a gun to my head, I'd be like, all right, fine. And then gross stuff happened because gross. And then I'd get shot, and that would be the end of my life. I can't do biotech. But, the immunity to the Force is the external thing. That's part of the external thing. It's actually more of a sub-point of the external thing. Now, I do like what Tig... So, okay, let's talk about the Vong for a second, because that's, I think, the main crux of this question, really. Because we have to do something with the Vong. Oh, no, the Zerg I'm okay with, but the Zerg are different. The Zerg are awesome. Live for the Swarm. The Force immunity thing is ridiculous. But... So, let's look at the Vong. And let's look at the Borg. Now, what is unique, what is truly unique about the Borg? Really? Can anyone answer me this question? You know, I'll give you that, Jaludo. Adaptation, okay. Not what I was going for, but I'm listening. Hive mind, okay. Kind of what I was going for. It's in Star Trek, not Star Wars. Okay, stab Huthor. They don't have civilians. Getting there. They seek perfection. They are inevitable. Honestly, yeah, probably. Juggernaut. Order, unity, cubes. No culture. Getting much closer. But no culture is probably as close as I've heard there. See, here's what's really unique about the Borg. They are not an analog for a real-life country. Now, I know that sounds like a weird thing to comment on, but all of the other powers of Star Trek are analogous, in oftentimes deliberately analogous, to real-life nations and national identities. These are the space French, these are the space Russians, these are the space Chinese, etc., etc. That goes back to the original series and continues forward into even the more recent stuff with Discovery. The Borg are not. As Sci-Fi Debris has said, as I have said before, the Borg are communism and capitalism both at the extreme level simultaneously, right? This is truly what makes them unique. The fact that they are something that is a, no pun intended, is a square peg for the round hole that is Star Trek. They don't fit in Star Trek in the traditional sense, but it works really well because it is their alien nature that makes them work so well. That makes the Borg so compelling and so interesting. The fact that the Borg are super powerful isn't what makes the Borg interesting, in my opinion. It is the fact that the Borg are unique. We can't negotiate with the Borg. Not really. We can't reach out diplomatically to the Borg. We can't try and find a compromise with the Borg. Right? Thus, they are something that has never really been dealt with before, and arguably never since in Star Trek history. Which leads me to the Vong. That's what I would want to do with the Vong. Make them something that doesn't fit. Make them something that doesn't actually... See, I'm saying this wrong, because obviously I do want it to fit within Star Wars. Just like the Borg fit in Star Trek. But something that doesn't work in the same way. Something that is actually alien to Star Wars. Now, the Vong already don't fit, but the reason they don't fit is because they're from the 90s. Like, I'm just going to say that as bluntly as I can. Pain, yes! We like to murder and torture. And then we torture ourselves. Because pain, we worship pain. And then we're going to destroy everything with gross because they're so 90s, it's actually kind of aggravating. But I do have an idea here. How many of you have actually read the Hand of Thrawn duology? Sorry. I'll never forget. There's this one art. This was one section. I think it was actually of Vector Prime, where the guy is just where Salvatore is describing in intricate detail how this guy is torturing himself and loving it, and I'm just like, I don't want to read this. Anyways, sorry. In the Hand of Thrawn duology, Talon Card and I can't remember her name go out and talk to, I can't remember his name, who used to be a crime lord guy. And it ties up a whole bunch of plot threads and blah, 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 moving forward. I don't want to spoil. The point is he meets these guys who are described as a rainbow of the Force. And you already see where I'm going with this. Up until the Hand of Thrawn, the Force has been maybe this, depending on who you ask, but at most this. Light, dark, in between. I would want to introduce new concepts to the Force, new ways of expressing the Force, new spectrum, right? A new spectrum to the Force. And that's the direction I would go with in the Vong. Like, in a way that it just kind of when they try to think of it in traditional terms. Make them... I'm trying to think of a way to express that doesn't involve basically having them have unique types of superpowers, but that's kind of the direction I'm going with on this, if I'm being honest. You know, the idea of certain Vong who have the ability to project really long distances with the Force, or morph and alter terrain with the Force, or fold space-time a little bit to teleport with the Force. You know, things that the Force traditionally can't do. But I would also probably make it so that they can't do the things the Force traditionally does. They don't have the basics like straight telekinesis or, you know, the precognition or the destiny fate attachment thing, you know, that kind of a thing. And at the end, I suppose that's the direction I would want to go with that. Something more forcey and less pain-worshipping biotech 90s extremism. Well, now, let me ask you something, Ahuthor, and I want an honest answer here. Would you say that the ability to... the ability of the main members of Star Trek, of the cast or whatever, to be able to reach out to and understand and negotiate with and interact with the other nations of Star Trek is an integral part of Star Trek? Well, we already do have a few extremely rare examples of Force attack, Matt Digzar. We actually talked about that with the Rakata during the KOTOR lore run. So I actually kind of like the idea of the Vong kind of leaning onto Force attack. Like, that's how they function. The only downside is, the more I think about that in my head, the more that sounds like Warhammer. But, whatever, I suppose. See, the only reason I hesitate on that, Malachor, is we've already seen the extremes of the Sith. Tor. I'm dead serious. If you've ever played through any of the Sith story arcs in Tor, then you've seen the extremes of Sith mentality in a culture. The Sith Empire in Tor is the Sith taken to their worst extreme. It's awful. It's the reason why the Sith Empire is self-destructing and eating itself. Like, seriously, I'm not even making that up. That's a story point. Is that the Sith Empire is killing itself because they are Sith to an extreme. Well, then we must fundamentally disagree, Huthor. I'm tired. I don't want to do the fight thing. Just pretend it's happening, like over here in the corner. God, we've been talking about this for a long time. We've also kind of seen the extremes of the Jedi in KOTOR and in the prequels, to be blunt. So, any sci-fi concept that doesn't sound like an existing sci-fi concept. No, you're right. I mean, you are right. You know what I would also do? If we're going down this idea of them being the array and using force attack, I would have R2D2 be, like, changed to include force attack so that R2 could use the force. Because I think that'd be an interesting change to the status quo. Because I'm a weirdo. Don't mind me. Let's move on. Let's move on. So yeah, we've got... let's talk about the snap. Don't worry. I did the wrong finger for a reason. Look, R2 has plot powers, not force powers. I guess this is the same thing. Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. Let's move this. Yes, Malachor. So, I think this is from Nerdman. Weird question. So, the snap. Thank you very, very much. Oof, hang on. Let me sit up a little bit better here. Thank you very, very much, Beat Nuki. Or Beat Nucky. I'm not sure how you want that pronounced. As ever, and as always, much appreciate those subs. Thank you very, very much. Now, if there's a future stream that you're interested in that you'd like to put that towards for helping funding and showing interest, let me know. If you're interested in everything, we actually have a category for that, too. But either way, thank you very much. But now I'm going to snap! Okay. So the snapping happens, right? The question is very simple. How much do you think this would affect other universes, assuming they were hit by it? He gives a few examples. Harry Potter, Star Wars, Star Trek, Mass Effect. How do you think they would react to the snap, and how much do you think it would affect those societies? Especially given the fact that they don't even know who Thanos is. I found this question interesting because if you think about it, this should have happened in the actual MCU. Probably did, actually. There were probably people who never even heard of Thanos. All of a sudden, they're coming home one day and just whoosh, right? Like, what? Okay, everything I'm not going to snap against. You got it, Beat. Is it Beat Nuki or Beat Nucky? Help me out here. I want to say it correctly, and I don't promise to remember because I am awful with names. But I'm going to try. Exactly, Max Time. Supposedly it was the whole universe, right? I should stop doing that with my left hand. Supposedly it was the whole universe. Now, I like the idea that in some settings there would be people of sufficient power and knowledge who might be able to have a vague idea. Beat Nuki. Okay, Beat Nuki. Or no. No, I'm not sure. Who would have like a vague idea of what happened, of some external force just, right? But like Harry Potter, imagine the wizards just going nuts trying to contain this. Imagine. So remember, the wizarding world in Harry Potter actually reports to and is a part of the Muggle governments, right? Well, I think the first thing that would happen... Discoin, you got it. I think the first thing that would happen would be that the governments would try to approach the wizarding community and say, "What did you do?" Right? That there would be a lot of anti-wizarding blame going around. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we basically got a new purge and crusade against the magic community in the Harry Potter setting because they blamed the magic users for this. Because the magic users wouldn't be able to explain it either. And they used magic, and people just dissolved into ashes. I mean, this is such a one-to-one kind of a thing. It happens to be wrong, but it's very logical. So that'd be fun. What did you do? I can actually imagine the Prime Minister just... What did you do? Hi, Seraphim. Star Wars. So, hang on just a second. What in the world are you doing? There we go. Whoop. I'm sure, like, someone at, say, Dumbledore's level. Oh, haha, Uthor. I'm sure somebody at Dumbledore's level would be able to understand that some external force wiped out half of them. Catches, how many beings are at Dumbledore's level by the end of Harry Potter? 0? Maybe 1? Okay, so here's the thing, Myron. I'm not actually going to give you a link to the vote. I'm going to give you a link to the thing you're going to be voting on. So, Myron, there we go. Now, once you're done with that, I'll give you the link to the vote. Just a second, I have a finger. I hate fingerprints. Coarse, irritating. They get everywhere. Well, if we take it that it's, say, modern times rather than like 2005 or whatever the heck it was, then I suppose Hermione would probably be the closest thing we have to a high-level super genius mage left in the Harry Potter setting. So, and now the question becomes, would Hermione live? Yep, Hermione lived. Let's see if Harry lives. Nope. Anyone else? Want to decide anyone else's fate while we're here? Because, I mean, this is what it is, really. This whole thing was impartiality, right? It was this whole thing. Ron, okay. Ron's alive. There's actually a bunch of answers to that emotion pond, but the long and the short of it is because the author didn't think of it until after the fact. Crookshanks, I don't remember who that is. Crookshanks is alive. Ginny is dead. Cyrus is dead. The cat. I don't even know who the cat is. Oh, Crookshanks the cat. Right. Why would he have a contingency plan, Blutonia? His contingency plan... Well, I shouldn't say that. No! No! Flitz McCain, no! Don't do it! Okay. Thank you very much, Flitz McCain. As ever and as always, I do appreciate your support. Thank you, I really do. Now, you know what I'm going to ask you, because I've said this before. So if you want to put that towards something, or if you want to put that in the I'm interested in everything pile, just let me know, but thank you very much. Star Wars. Which Star Wars? Because there's two. There's two Star Warses. Let's assume AU, okay? So let's see what happens to Luke. Well, he's alive. Anyone, Rey? Okay, let's see what happens to Rey Palpatine. I mean, not Rey. She's dead. Please, let's not go down the Last Jedi route. Let's leave that at the door. I just realized. What you were asking. Yeah, everyone get it out of your system. Let's move on. Let's move on. C-3PO. Does it affect droids? Because droids can be sentient and sapient. The droid effect, right? There's a reason that term exists. But, I mean, we know he affected plants and animals. We know that, which is dumb, but whatever. I mean, yeah, like Data would be another interesting question. Would Data be affected by this? See, that's not true. Droids do need power. They need resources, the energy, which has to be to produce by something, which has to be produced something. Basically, it's the same problem. Like, I have electricity. Yeah, this is using coal. This is literally using coal right here. It's just not directly one-to-one. So let's assume yes. Let's just assume he does snap out droids, too. That'll be hell of a thing. So C-3PO lives. I know, Tickot, I know. How would the Force react to the snap? Now, that's actually an interesting thing. So let's see something. Let's do the light side. And the dark side. So both are gone. if we assume it applies to the Force, and it could. Honestly, though, I think that Star Wars would have been kind of like. Honestly, someone earlier mentioned it. I think that a lot of Star Wars people would. Well, okay. Right now, what other mental states are there? Good question. Depends on the continuity. Let's examine something for a moment. Star Wars is an intergalactic community. There are entire planets who only subsist off of imports. You know, Coruscant is the most extreme example, and the one that writers have spent literally years trying to explain, but you get the idea. There are still planets that basically rely on other planets to exist, right? So with this, I keep screwing that one up. There's a pretty good chance that the intergalactic web of trade would cease to function. And if it did, there's a pretty good chance that most of... Okay, Myron. Well, let me give you the actual vote now that you've listened to it. I think Baron needs this too. So there's the vote. There we go. Yeah, the galaxy's screwed. You're right. It is intra, not inter. Because I know why I screw it up too. It's because international seems to address neatly into intergalactic, but that doesn't actually work. It would be interstellar. You're right. You are correct. It's not the first time I've made that mistake. So the intergalactic network, the interstellar network, the galactic network would be screwed. Completely and utterly self-destructed. Like, there are probably... What we would basically see is a... back into literal Dark Age. Into a place where there is no functional intragalactic community anymore. At least not in the sense that it is now. You know, there would be ships literally stuck in hyperspace. There would be... they're just going to keep going until they hit a mass shadow somewhere. There would be... There would be planets who would literally starve out. Coruscant would completely self-destruct. So yeah, I think that the Star Wars galaxy would enter a new Dark Age. Which brings me to Star Trek. Star Trek could be fine. I'm serious. Star Trek is already at a state where they have functionally solved the issues of space, population, and resources. Star Trek would be fine. I mean, it would be horrible, but Star Trek would be fine. When replicators exist, you know what I mean? So. Sorry. Oh, there'd be panic. There'd probably be war. Wars. Let's make that plural. Imagine what the Breen would do about that. Imagine how the Dominion would react. I want you to picture a giant liquid sea. And you're looking out at it. And all of a sudden, like, half of it just kind of goes away in random spots. Yeah, the Borg? Actually, the Borg are an interesting question. But you get the point. There would be wars, and there would be a conflict, and it would be horrible. But I don't think Star Trek would self-destruct in any sense. I think it'd be fine. What was the other? Hang on, where's the list? What else do we have here? Harry Potter, Mass Effect. Oh God, that's true, Ticoita, because it's a gradual thing, right? The snap happens. It's not like everything just instantly winks out like the Q. They kind of ash away, right? So hypothetically, the Borg could literally adapt as the snap is taking effect. As the half of the drones of a cube go away, they're reallocating as it happens. That's actually really weird to think about, but yeah. So the Q, I think the Q would be affected by it. I'm one of those people who's never bought that the Q are all-powerful, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. Instead, I've always thought that the Q are more along the lines of extremely advanced, powerful aliens, but not top tier. So I think the Q would be affected by it. Now, I'm not sure what the Q would do about it. Like, I'm honestly not sure what the Q would do about that. Because it is within the realm of possibility to say that the Q would be like, oh, let's just fix this. Just, there we go. We're good. We're good. We're cool. Everyone's back. It is also within the realm of possibility that the Q would completely flip out. Remember, they literally, very minor spoilers for Voyager, they literally went to civil war with each other over one of them killing themselves. Quinn, right? Imagine if all of a sudden half the Q collective dies. I don't think they'd take that well. I don't know how they'd take that, but I don't think they'd take that well. And actually, I think Dakota's right. I think the Q would probably go find Thanos because they could probably dimensionally chop and be like, you! Thanos is like, well, who are you? You know? The Q would also probably know what happened. They're probably one of the extremely few beings we've talked about that would just know that this is what just happened. That's true, Savicom. Pokemon? No, leave Pokemon alone. Pokemon is fine, because Thanos looked at the Pokemon world, and in his infinite wisdom decided it was already balanced and left it alone. There we go, the end. Mass Effect was the last one that was mentioned. How would Mass Effect react to that? At what point in time? That's the problem. Let's assume pre-Mass Effect 3, just to make this easy. Nope, Pokemon World is balanced. We're cool. We coo. Nope, Pokemon is unaffected by the decimation. Sorry. It's already balanced. What? We just did Star Trek. We literally just finished talking about Star Trek, Tigzar. So, Mass Effect, the Reapers. I'm sorry. So, half the Reapers are gone. And then the galaxy wins conventionally. We're good! No, okay, for real, though. I don't know what would happen to the Mass Effect galaxy. That's a weird question. Like, how... Oh, excuse me. Hey, they come up with the term permeous. We didn't come up with the term decimation. Is there a term for slicing something in half that isn't like halving? Because you can't call it the halving. That just, there's no oomph to that. Flip for the catalyst. Ooh, hang on. Catalyst is gone! I'm serious. Yeah, 40K, 40K would just be like, whatever. Moving on. Mass Effect. I honestly am not sure how Mass Effect, because I can actually picture certain governments in Mass Effect being like, nope, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. We're all cool. But half of everyone just died. No, they didn't. What are you talking about? No wonder this is weird. This is facing the wrong way. There we go. We're all cool. There's nothing wrong here. Someone mentioned Zelda. There's only one way to answer Zelda. So, power. Power's fine. Wisdom. Wisdom's gone. And courage. Courage is gone. Well, that answers that, doesn't it? The toys in Toy Story? Oh, they're fine. They looked up at the Disney overlords and said, "We can make you money!" And Disney was like, "We shall spare you from the snappening." So, um, Anderson. Nope, Anderson's fine. Would the Reapers keep going as planned? Honestly, probably. They might wait a little while longer. Or they might attack right now. Kingdom Hearts? Oh, jeez. Alright, let's do Sora. Let's do him first. You ready? Sora's fine. Let's do Xehanort. Xehanort's gone! Does that mean all of them are gone? Xion. Xion's gone. Damn, Riku. Riku's fine. Yeah, it's Aqua. Aqua's gone. What happens to the coin? Coin's fine. Seriously. What happens to Dragon Age? War. Lots of war. If we assume that the Tevinter and the Qunari are affected equally, like that's bad. You know people would blame the Tevinter for the snap. In-universe. In a similar way to the Harry Potter thing we mentioned, they would be... fingers would be pointing towards the Mage Nation. And the mages in general. Yeah. Yeah. Like, you think the mage problem was bad in the first 3 games. We'd be at full-on Inquisition levels. You know what I mean. What about the Darkspawn? There's several creatures we've talked about that it's getting debatable if they count as individuals. Or as life. No, we have not, Zero, and I honestly don't plan to. Like, I mean, there was some decent stuff released, but nothing really that interesting other than the class thing. Snap the Ace Attorney universe. Okay. What about Warcraft? I would say the Forsaken count, absolutely. I mean, they are living and individuals, so they're good. So, the end. Now here's one for you. So check this out. Illidan, post-Legion. And anybody who's finished Legion knows why that's relevant. So Illidan's gone. So let's do Sargeras. Hang on. Okay, we're okay. Sargeras is also gone. Disaster averted. Because that'd be the end of Warcraft right there. I'm not even joking about that. The DC universe? Oh, jeez. I have no idea. The Kefked really is still bouncing. Look at that. It's doing its thing there. Alright, fine. This is the last one we'll do, because we got to move on to the next topic. We've been talking for a while about this. So, Final Fantasy VI. Let's just go down the list in order. Terra. And Terra's dead. Locke is alive. Edgar is dead. Sabin is alive. Oh, that's terrible. Edgar was one of the only people who could actually have helped restore the world on a national level. You know, have the infrastructure and political power necessary and the know-how to really be a leader in the world of Ruin. So that might be a renewed Dark Age just with Edgar dead. Let's do Kefka, although I was thinking post FF6, but Kefka's fine. What are we up to? I did Sabin, so next would be, I guess, Mog. Mog's alive. Shadow is alive. So then we go this way, so let's do Cyan. Cyan is alive. Gao is alive. And then we do that, and then we do Celeste. What? Celeste is dead. That's Celeste and Terra. And Edgar. So then we go over to Setzer. He's alive. Then we go down to, I guess, Strago. He's alive. Realm is dead. Oh. Umaro is dead. Gogo is dead. Geshtal is already dead. I don't know why I'm even looking for that one. Hang on. Interceptor's dead. Geshtal is alive. Apparently, Mace. Let's see. Who am I missing? Let's do the three goddesses. Not that they matter. So that's Poltergeist, who is dead. So there's the imbalance. Doom is dead. I already did Mog. And Goddess is dead. All three statues are dead. That would be fun. Okay, let's move on. So, I actually have two Mass Effect Elseworlds questions. So I'm going to let you decide between them, because we just keep getting Mass Effect Elseworlds questions. And they are somewhere here. Yeah, sure. Deacon is alive. We're cool. So let's see. What do we got here? So the first Mass Effect Elseworlds question is about basically Asari the Masquerade, for those of you who get the reference. The second question is, what would be the World War I equivalent of the Mass Effect galaxy? Which of these would you like to tackle? Oh yeah, I suppose we should do Shepard over in Mass Effect while we're at it really quick. Shepard's alive. But is Rex? Is Garrus? Is nobody's dying? Is Tali? Tali's alive too. Whatever. We could flip for it and do the other one next week. Not really. The Rachni Krogan thing was probably closer to World War II equivalent. Yeah, let's just coin it. Let's just speed this up a bit here. So, one last flip for today. So, we're going to do the World War I one. World War I. Timestamp, since we're approaching the 2-hour mark here. So, here's the actual question as written. You are asked to write a Elseworld game in Mass Effect. The premise is World War I in Mass Effect universe. And it has to be a trilogy for some reason. Who would you have be the central power and the Allies' equivalents? Who would start the war? Who would be neutral? The Reapers, unrelated. They're over there. You can play as Shepard if you want. Game 1 is the beginning, Game 2 is the middle, Game 3 is the end. The Great War. Thoughts? Oh. Now I'm thinking this would basically be set before Mass Effect 1, but after the First Contact War, for this to really be feasible. Otherwise we just have to kind of the humans out of the equation. Now, funnily enough, I was actually thinking that K should be the central Axis power, since K is in fact a Nazi. But, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. No, I do agree with the Asari basically being the Germany equivalent here. I know Turians are kind of the obvious choice, but think about the kind of power and influence the Asari wield on the galactic stage for a second. Hi, K, by the way. So I actually like the idea of the Asari being the central point of the Axis powers. I shouldn't call them the Axis. I keep misusing it. Of the central powers. Now, for this to be the Great War equivalent, basically everyone has to get involved to some extent or another. So, the Turians being on the side of the Asari makes a lot of sense to me. Damn those sexy blue Germans. Look, if they weren't so sexy... No, the Solarians would probably honestly be on the Central Powers, too. And honestly, we could just stop there. Solarians, Asari, Turians makes a hell of a central front, right? So that leaves us with everything else. So... Uh, I'm assuming you mean because the Asari and Turians are simply too strong together, Dakota? I was thinking the Krogans would actually be the Russians in the equivalency here. Not a great parallel, I'll admit. I have no idea where the humanity would be. I mean, the obvious answer is to say the humanity would be United States, aka not getting involved until the final act, and then being like, okay, fine. We could have the humans to be divided. Zero, okay? I'm gonna go 0. Funnily enough, I was thinking of the Balkans, too, for the humans. I don't know. Who's the Krogan Lenin? Rex. Humanity being Serbia. Now, that's an interesting idea. So humanity would then have to be closely connected to the Austria equivalent, which in this would actually be the Asari. Maybe. Pass, Plutonia. Then the Hanar would be Switzerland. You want the Turians to be the Austrians? I mean, I heard someone earlier say the Asari being the Austrians. I admit I kind of like that. Because the Austrians were kind of the backbone, the industrial might behind the military might for a bit there. Although the Austrians were also kind of the ones who basically dragged in the Russians by virtue of their connections to the Serbians and their indirect connections to the Germans, which allowed the Germans and the Russians to push against each other in the direction of mobilization. And God, let's just stop. I just realized. Hang on. We could keep going for a while. Yeah, we're taking this too literally. I agree. Let's rewind a second. We don't need a central power. We don't need an allies race. What we need is a world war, a galactic war. That's the whole point. The whole point of the Great War was everyone was involved. That was the whole point of it. It wasn't the First World War, despite the nomenclature, but it was the Great War for a reason. So, big, huge conflict, galaxy-wide, that affects basically everyone, and is going to slog out for a while. That's our requirements here. Yeah, the war to end all wars. Almost. So I like Dakota's thought process here. Let's try to figure out what sparks the war and what keeps it going. Because both of those factors were the big things for the Great War. What sparked it was obviously the interconnection of political entanglements and the nature of mobilization and what had just happened with the Prusso-Frankish War and, of course, the incident in Sarajevo. What kept it going was the fact that nobody was really adjusted to the new era of warfare, and so people were utilizing old methods with new technology that didn't quite apply the same way and basically led to everyone just kind of attritioning each other to death. I mean, you remember when several of the planners for the Great War said that the Great War would last like 6 months, maybe a year? I sometimes wonder who coined that phrase, Blackfile. Because someone had to have coined that, right? Anyways. Oh, I know the Nazi planners said World War II would be over very quickly. And funnily enough, it almost was, except for the fact that they were the Nazis. And there's way more going into that. Let's actually leave that alone. Let's move that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's get back to the Great War here. So, actually, it's funny you say that, Takoida. I was thinking if we're setting this before Mass Effect 1, and this is an Elseworlds, right? So, we could keep most of the story relatively the same up to this point, and then this is like the branching point in the storyline. I like the idea that humanity is not a galactic power. that they are very new on the scene, they're very hungry for colonies, and maybe they're part of the spark for the war. But what they most definitely are is filling the gaps the war left behind. I like that idea. In a similar vein to how humanity kind of took power if you took down the Council back in Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, I like the idea that humanity just starts filling in the cracks. Not even necessarily from a conquering, evil sort of mentality, but just humanity kind of staying out of the conflict as a whole, since they can't fight at the level it's being fought at, but instead providing humanitarian aid and basically getting connections, trade connections, or infrastructure connections, political ties to different worlds and different colonies and different powers as a consequence of doing this, right? Now, the cheating answer... Yeah, the Terminus systems. The cheating answer here is we could say the Reapers start the war and the Reapers keep the war going. That is the cheat answer. That is a way we could use this story to establish the Reapers for the next arc. Remember, that was actually part of the question, too. In other words, the idea here is that there are, indoctrinated people who are trying to continue to push this shadow war, this great war, to break down the powers of the galaxy to prepare for an invasion. I say that's a cheating answer because that's so easy. That's such a duh answer, right? Yeah, DS9. Actually, that's an interesting idea, Dakota. Maybe the Reapers see the Great War starting, so we have a separate spark, which we still haven't identified, and then the Reapers and their indoctrinated agents keep it going. That's what allows the war to kind of perpetuate far longer than it really should have. I kind of like that idea, actually. So what's the spark? What starts the Great War? Now, someone mentioned the Batarians trying to leave the Council. Part of the problem here is, as I was trying to elucidate on earlier, the actual spark for the Great War in real life was actually very complicated. There was the assassination in Sarajevo, but that was one of like 50 elements. There was a giant chain of dominoes there. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to think of something that works, that isn't too simplistic, to help ignite a galactic war. But how does that start a war, Geludo? Like, what does that do to cause war between everyone? No, the Clone Wars started because one guy was running both sides. Let's just be 100% clear on that one. That is what started the Clone Wars. Palpatine. Not to give the man too much credit, but really. I suppose you could also argue Plagueis, but you get my point. Plagueis and Palpatine. Yeah. It's really horrible to study it, Justin. If anybody's ever studied the Great War, the lead up to the Great War actually igniting is just wow. The assassination of the consort. It's an interesting idea. Damn it, man, Darton. Hang on, I need to ask these questions. What started? Who killed the dinosaurs? Me! It's the funniest thing in all of Futurama right there. Okay, hang on. So let's rewind a second. So we've established a few things. We've got the AI incident of Rannoch, and we've got the Rachni incident with the Krogan, right? Now, realistically, both of these probably should have had more long-ranging consequences than they did in Mass Effect setting. It's kind of weird that they didn't. But those both give us establishing ground level for the beginnings of a conflict, right? For a galactic society that is not united. Differing sides, different perspectives, and people starting to make alliances with these guys and these guys, but not these guys or these guys, right? So we have the possibility now of one of the key elements of the Great War, interconnecting alliances. So I like the idea that as a direct consequence, I'm not ignoring it, Dakota, but I'm going to steal your idea completely. I guess it's not stealing if I say that. Of the internet connecting consequences of the previous two conflicts, leading to, for example, the Solarian, whatever they were called, unifying with someone. We'd have to decide. But the Solarians unifying with such and such, and the Asaris unifying with such, and so forth and so on. So that even though technically they're still the council races, each of them is more connectly allied with another power than with all of the other powers, right? And I do like Dakota's idea. This is what I'm stealing here. I love the idea, I guess it's not stealing, of there being like a genetic research thing with the Solarians, which kind of pushes some of the other races, or at least one of the other races, off. Solarian Union, thank you. So the Solarian Union reaches out to whoever their connection is, which there's several options there, really. And the Solarians, the Batarians and the Turians are the most obvious options, but... So the Solarians are reaching out to them, so there's like a direct pipeline between the Solarians and such. And so when this research starts to become a thing, I like the idea that the council pushes forth an idea. This is getting a little political. The council pushes forth the idea of trying to shut down, right? Of trying to basically apply some tariffs or something like that to the Solarians, right? To try and bring them to heel in a non-military manner. But this ends up causing a fairly significant impact because economic sanctions do have some significant effect, especially on a society like theirs. So the Solarians get a little bit more desperate, and they reach out to their ally a little bit more connectedly. I do like the Batarians, so they reach out to the Batarians even more, which leads to the Council eventually trying to push the Solarians out of it. And basically what we have here is several of these factions. What I'm trying to do here is build a situation that is on the verge of collapse, but not quite there yet. Because I like Black Val's idea of the consort being the I can't think of his name all of a sudden. Ferdinand event, right? Again, we don't have to have a one-to-one. But I do like the idea that the consort, who remember has tremendous connections with everyone, has been basically trying to like rope all of these different powers together and just trying to hold them, and then for what is effectively completely unrelated reasons, like not related to anything. It's not a political assassination, it's not a military attack, just someone kills the consort, right? Bam. That removal from the board leads to all of this effort and all of these connections that have been trying to drag the powers back into unity to vaporize. So now we have a very hotbed situation where most of the major galactic powers are already antagonistic towards each other. And the one person with the influence and reach and foresight necessary to try and stabilize this is removed from the board. So that wouldn't actually be the impetus per se, but that would be the thing that would prevent the dam from breaking, in other words. And at some point or another, someone would actually attack someone else, or you know what, here's another thing. One of the biggest reasons why World War I started was mobilization. I know that sounds like a weird thing, but if you've ever studied military history, you know what I mean. And I don't want to go on too much a tangent here. But the point being, mobilization is an extremely important thing. You may have an army of 100,000, but if all those 100,000 people are off sleeping in their homes and civilian life because they're not in active duty, that army is useless. Except you have to mobilize. I mean, this is a duh, right? But mobilization is not a thing you can do quietly. So I like the idea that the Batarians, Solarians are like, oh god, quick, mobilize. And so the Batarians start mobilizing. Well, the Turians see that, and they're like, well, we have to mobilize too. Because not because they're going to war, not because of a preemptive attack, but because the Batarians are mobilizing, and for no other reason. You can't have your army at home when another army is on the field, right? I mean, this is just base military logic. So the Turians mobilize. Then what if the Krogans see this situation, and the Krogans start to militarize? And you get where I'm going with this. You get the idea of how this just can build and build and build. And by the time you have all this mobilization going on, all it would take was one ship and one captain shooting one other ship, and bam, war. I like that idea too, Loner. So, anyways, so we've got our spark, we've got our build up, and God, there's so much to talk about here because what the Krogans would do. Honestly, I think that the Krogans, as Takoida says, aren't a faction. The Krogans would absolutely be a part of this. Like, probably each given clan of the Krogans would be playing at one side or another, or even multiple sides, you know. In addition to literally being mercenary work on whoever's willing to hire them, I like the idea that, as Takoida says, multiple of the clans are trying to push agendas, either trying to aspire for more long-term political position for the Krogans, because Rex would be doing that, and Erdnot, right? Or a clan that's pursuing a grudge against the Solarians, or a clan that's trying to just, you know, take a big bite out of the Batarians, or whatever, right? Like, each clan just kind of doing its own thing, effectively. That's true, Blackbow. Yeah, pretty much. Um, oh yeah, Drac would be involved too, absolutely. And yeah, clans fighting the Turians just because of a grudge or whatever. Or some, I really like the idea that some Krogan are basically like, "This is awesome," and are just enjoying the Great War, the Great Galactic War. Now, we have to decide how this war ends too. Let's ignore a lot of the middle ground here. Let's kind of move towards the end. How does the war end? Now, admittedly, I kind of like the idea that the war doesn't really end in victory for anybody. I mean, obviously, someone's going to have to sign something with someone. But I like the idea that the war basically just everyone, just yeah, exactly, just batters the whole galaxy to a pulp. And I like that because A, it makes sense. That's kind of what the Great War did. But B, and more importantly, again, that leads neatly into the Reapers. As I said earlier, I love the idea that the Reapers discovered the Great War and were like, "Oh, we can use this. We could so use this," and just kind of kept the war going, you know. I also like the idea that one of the things, one of the many, many, many consequences of the Great War in real life was it was the end of empires, right? Now, obviously, we do have our own new empires in the more modern era, but you get what I'm talking about. It was the end of the kingdoms, the end of the monarchies. And I like the idea of a similar thing affecting the Mass Effect galaxy. I like the idea that rather than the Turians, we have the Turian such and such, and the Turian whatchafig, and the Turian objabla, right? I like the idea of rather than the Solarian Union, we have, you know, these. I like the idea of the pieces being broken up more, basically. Not all of them, obviously. Some forces would probably say relatively united or whatever. But I like the idea of the pieces being scattered more, politically speaking, more flags on the board. And that would naturally lead into a potential future thing for, you know, the Reaper invasion. I also have to admit, despite the fact that the question flat out said only hints of the Reapers, I love the idea of the last game of this involving a fight against a Reaper that, as Beat Nuki just said there, a Reaper ship that came in basically like Sovereign. Remember, we know that Sovereign was actually playing at games for centuries to get the galaxy ready for invasion, right? So there's probably, as of this Great War, there is probably a Reaper active in the galaxy, right? That's the Reaper that probably sees this and decides to take advantage of it. And I like the idea that we end up fighting that Reaper at the conclusion of the third game, in one manner or another. Gertrude. Hmm. That does sound like Tim, okay. Oh yeah, absolutely. It wouldn't be a full-scale Reaper. In fact, to use the equivalent terms, it'd probably be one of those weaker ones. Not like the full Sovereign ship, but like the little ground walkers. I forget what they're called. We actually fight one of them in Mass Effect 3. Actually, we fight two of them, excuse me, in Mass Effect 3. The Destroyer class, there you go. Instead of the big ol' class. He could also just be Sovereign completely on his own. I do agree that would be enough. And that would be a hell of a fight. Oh. Yeah, the Geth. What the hell do we do with the Geth in a Great War? See, the thing is, from what I understand, we'd either have to rewrite the Geth, or we'd have to have them basically stay out of it. Like, I can't see the Geth actually getting really involved in the Great War. What reason would they have to? Right? The Geth are outlawed, first of all. Oh, no, I've got it. One power or another offers the Geth clemency, the ability to become legally galactic citizens in exchange for military aid. So one side or the, I don't know who, but one of the various factions involved who is, having issues is like, reaches out to the Geth and says, we will, if we win, you come give us military aid, we will legalize you so you can actually join the galactic community. I imagine the consensus would be divided. This is how we could explain how the Geth don't just curb stomp whoever they fight. Because the Geth are a hell of a military force, very unified and very coordinated. But if they only send some of the Geth, because only some of the Geth decide to go with that, I agree to quote it. That's why I'm going this other direction with it. Now, the funny thing is, hear me out, what if we got to the point where, so we've got the Geth, and then part of them head over here. What if, let's just assume it's the Solarians. What if the Solarians are willing to give the Geth, legality? What if then the Solarians, not the Solarians, sorry, the Turians were also reached out to the Geth and said, hey, we'll offer you legally if you fight for us instead. And you can see how this would just dissolve into a mess very quickly. I kind of like that idea. Well, first of all, Cerberus is obviously a galactic power with huge numbers of troops and personnel and ships, so they just conquer the entire galaxy. Oh, wait, no. I have a brain. So instead, Cerberus is probably someone, so it'll rotate the right way, Sonoshi. Yeah, Kay, I don't mean to complain, Kay, because this is an awesome background. I love it. But people would not stop complaining about the fact that it was rotating the wrong way. So I just flipped it. Oh my goodness. See you around, Justin. Oh my gosh. Thank you very, very much, Ten-Headed Hydra. As ever, much appreciate those subs. Thank you. If you'll give me a moment, I will jot that towards Expedition Vikings. I thought people had forgotten about that game. Ten-Head Hydra. So noted. And thank you again, sir. Who would try to exploit humanity? That's a good question. Here, I'll flip it back. Screw it. I like the idea of everyone trying to exploit humanity. I mean, I know that sounds all horrible, but I do. I like that idea. Hang on, how do I... There we go. I like the idea of humanity basically not having a galactic military. Let's start with that. I like the idea that they don't have a big fleet. I like the idea that they are not a major player on the galactic stage. So they cannot have any significant or substantial military impact on the war, right? However, I also like the idea that humanity is just kind of off colonizing on their own as the Great War is happening, and have access to a fairly large amount of resources and, let's be honest with ourselves, slave labor. So, I like the idea that some of the power, basically everyone, tries to take a bite out of humanity to help fund the war, right? Just being like, all right, clunk, yoink. I like the idea that some people would do it literally by force. I mean, let's be honest, the Batarian hegemony is kind of horrible. So the Batarians moving in and just trying to literally, as Takoida says, pirate and flat out steal human resources and people to fund the war effort, that makes sense. I like the idea that the Asari would reach out in their particular manner, basically trying to secure trade negotiations and coordination with them, in order to take their resources for themselves and blah, 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 blah. And I also kind of like the idea of the humans basically making a deal with the Asari, connecting to the Turians to allow the humans to basically get ships earlier and better than they should. Effectively using them, let's say, I don't know Emotion Pawn, so let's just, the Blitz doesn't exist. It kind of doesn't. So let's say the humans don't really have... they basically get a jump start on their own military as a consequence of being connected to one side or another in the war. I like the idea of them being connected to the Turians. That just makes sense to me. But whichever side, It would also make sense if they're being actively pirated by the Batarian side to have them reach out to the other side and seek help, which the other side would be like, Like, imagine the Turian military commanders at that point. Well, that's another front that we can't really afford to fight on, but on the other hand, if we don't do anything about that, the humans are just going to become a resource pool and factory for the Batarians. So we got to do something, right? Ergo, the war expands. And if you're paying attention, this is kind of what happened to the Great War, too, as the fronts just kind of went everywhere. I mean, I'm not even talking about the African fronts during the Great War. Holy crap. Probably Takoida. This could also be the moment where the Turians officially divest themselves, in part, from the Asari. Because remember, I love the idea of the flags being distributed. So maybe some of the Turians, basically remove themselves from the alliance with the Asari. They pull in Italy. There's a lot of directions we could go with that, actually. I also love the idea that the Asari, for lack of a better term, are surprisingly unified during the war, because of how they are culturally. And then pretty much the moment the war ends, they go back to being like just hundreds of different little factions. Just whoosh, to the winds. I mean, that makes sense, right? The United States actually works that way in real life. We are super divided here in the United States. Unless you attack us from outside, then we all of a sudden get really united really fast. Anyways, so what about Shepard? God, I don't know. Does Shepard exist? Hang on. Let's see if Shepard exists. Whoop. Nope, hang on. Yeah, let's try that again. There we go. Nope, Shepard's gone. Shepard's like, wait, the Reaper just turns into ash and it's gone. The Quarians. Oh, geez. Honestly, I like the idea of the Quarians basically naturally ending up on the side against the Geth, right? So remember, I mentioned how the Geth were pulled in by the Solarians. So the Geth are fighting for the Solarians, but then some of the Geth end up fighting for the other side. So the Quarians end up getting involved on the Turian side, or the Asari side, rather. But then the Asari reach out to the Geth, which pushes the Quarians away from them. But by this point, the Quarians already have a de facto state of war with the Solarians because they've already been fighting them. So the Quarians are basically forced into either continuing to be with the Asari for military protection against the Solarian Union, or going and finding someone else to unify with in order to push against the Solarians. Remember, there doesn't just have to be two sides here. In fact, I'd rather do like 5 or 15. I don't have that many hands. So, I like the idea that the Quarians basically bounce alliances several times before settling on someone. And if I'm being honest, I think the idea that appeals most to me is the Solarians ending up with the rogue Turians and the humans against the Batarians and the Solarians. Or, I said that wrong. All their names sound too similar. I like the idea of the Quarians ending up with the rogue Turians and the humans against the Batarians and the Solarians. There, I think I did that right. What would the Quarians offer, though? The same things the humans do. Support. The Turians, what we're building here with our additional faction here over on the side is basically several nations hyper-specializing in order to support the war effort. The Turians basically fronting the military side of it, the human resource cost. The humans offering the resource side of it, and the Quarians offering their expertise with regards to logistics, shielding, as you mentioned, and repair and support. So we have a hell of a fighting force there, if you think about it. Now, it might not be able to stand up against, like, the Asari Alliance over there, or the Solarian Alliance by themselves, but remember, those two forces are fighting each other. So, this little side force here would be able to hold its own reasonably well as long as nobody looked at them too closely. Why would humanity develop carriers? What do you mean? I mean, carriers are cool. Hang on. Joe Bib Bob walks up and says, "You know what? We should make carriers." And the guy's like... And then carriers happen. See around upon a time. Carriers can absolutely win a space battle. Space is Beyond Beyond. That's all I have to say about that. Great show, by the way. Interesting idea, Takoida. Okay, weird thought. Hear me out. What if the Quarian-human Side-Turian alliance actually started making Protoss carriers? Hear me out. The whole point of a Protoss carrier is it actually has a fairly small crew. It's there to maintain and support the carrier thing, but the actual ships, those are doing their own thing, right? Those are drones. Those are AI-driven drones. Now, that would require the Geth getting involved, but we already have two separate factions of Geth who are off doing their own thing, right? Although, actually, I take that back. I don't think that would require Geth. I don't. I think the Quarians, with their expertise, which with computing, which remember is only one generation off right now, could go ahead and come up with a VI system for automated fighters. And you might say, well, why do you care? Well, because this makes a lot of sense, given the fact that this particular faction is severely lacking in the raw manpower, as well as the raw military material that the other factions have. Now, how about instead of VI, hold me up. Yeah, what Loner got there before me. What if we go a slightly different direction? What if the Quarians just help them to develop... I mean, you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 2, right? The people aren't actually in the fighters as they're fighting. They're back home in a thing connected to the fighter and controlling it remotely. So we would still have drones, but they're actually being actively controlled by a pilot on the carrier. Thus, any loss of drones, any loss of fighters, would not actually be too much of a problem, given the fact that, you know, they could just rebuild the craft rather than losing a skilled pilot. How they defeat the delay? We could hand-wave that. There's too many ways to defeat. This is a setting in which we can have a real-time conversation with someone halfway across the galaxy. I'm not worried about the delay. It can be jammed, and I kind of like that idea. Because remember, if this group is fighting against the Solarians, which they would, the Solarians' main movement against that would probably be jamming. In fact, one of the things I like that Mass Effect did was it talked about how the computing intelligence and counterintelligence aspect of combat is actually a fairly regular thing. Edie has several discussions about how she is constantly trying to reach out to, whatever, to enemy ships to screw with their tech while they're reaching out to screw with her tech. That's a regular aspect of that. The problem is the only real solution to that I can come up with is AI. Is Cerberus getting involved and, using Edie or something similar. And the problem is the Quarians would just be like, "Rah," about that whole thing. Yeah, the cyber warfare suit, that's it. Or suite, excuse me. I don't know. That would need some ironing out. I still love the idea. However, if we're being honest, a more likely group to develop the remote control, to develop the AI drone carrier thing is the Solarians and the Geth and the Batarians. That's a lot more likely of a thing to actually happen. So, yeah. That's true. They could do this once, just for one big moment. That's not a bad point to quote it. Anyways, I'm gonna pause for just a second. So, for those of you still watching, we're about to spoil stuff. Spoilers. Because we're going to spoil Detective Pikachu, because this has been a little bit delayed in happening. But we are going to finally discuss the Detective Pikachu film. I hope at least someone's going to be around for this. Maybe. Anybody? Please? But I am going to take a very brief break before we do that. So I'll be right back, guys. There we go. Okay, that's like 40 seconds of spoilers. Warning. Oh, the spoiler warnings. So we're going to officially... Just get rid of that for the moment. We're going to officially talk about spoilers. Spoilers, 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 spoilers. Now, as usual, I like to kind of lead into spoilers rather than leading with spoilers. So I just want to say something about my film-going experience. I've actually talked many times about how I enjoy a good reactive crowd, right? And how I'm weird for being that way because I'm not European. But we actually had probably the worst crowd I've had in a long time for Detective Pikachu. Now, it wasn't actually bad, but it was certainly nowhere near as good as most of the recent crowds I've had when it comes to films. And most of that could be explained by the very young children who are in the same row as us, both to the left and to the right. And when I say young children, I'm talking like 6 and under. One of the kids actually would not stop crying basically, the whole time. And the woman eventually had to take her out of the theater. One of the kids on the right would be like, woo, yay, every time action scenes were happening. And then the moment the action scene stopped, would get bored and just start playing around loudly on the floor of the theater in a very distracting manner. Yay. And that's a good lead up. So, there's a scene where Bill Nighy shows up. And I'm like, oh, it's Bill Nighy. Huh. And I leaned over to Third and I was like, what do you want to bet he's the villain? And Third's like, why? Because he's Bill Nighy. Called it. Actually, if I'm being completely honest, I actually called every single twist in this film. It's weird because there's several. There's like 3 major twists in the film. Hang on, there's the Nighy one, there's the Reynolds one. I feel like there's another one. I guess there's the Mewtwo one. So yeah, there's 3 major twists in the film. And every single one of them I was like, yeah, no. I don't know, Blackfile. Now, that being said, let me go ahead and say that I actually rather liked the film. I really did. It was actually surprisingly good. Very simple. But there's nothing wrong with simple as long as it's well done. And I really enjoyed a lot of the attention to detail, especially in the background. There were a lot of little details going. Oh, I guess the Ditto was the 4th one. I didn't catch that one. I'll admit that. I didn't call that one. But there are a lot of, like, I found myself paying attention to everything happening during the panning shots, right? Like, oh, look, and oh, there's a such, I don't remember all the details right now, but there was a lot of effort and work put into what was going on, not in the main focus of the film. I actually made the comment to Third that I wonder if they got a group of creative people together and like, all right, I want you all to think, what would this Pokemon, what would a Growlithe be doing in real life? Go. And just people tossing out ideas for a more mundane perspective on Pokemon. And I loved that. I really did. I thought that was great. Because obviously the people who did it put some real thought and effort into making a city that looked believable. Like, I could actually believe that world that we saw in that film. They also did a surprisingly good amount of exposition. Right at the beginning, there's a bit where he goes to catch a Cubone. And, his whole thing about, okay, and it's got to accept you. It's got to turn green. And you have to make a connection with your Pokemon. All of that was a very quick and dirty exposition of exactly how capturing and using Pokemon works in this setting. Basically a variant on how the anime works, which, by the way, people have confirmed, yes, this is canon with the Pokemon 2000 film. And exactly, Julie, you got a down B! But I liked that. There was a lot of good little stuff like that. I also really enjoyed Ryan Reynolds a lot. Not a surprise, I enjoy him in almost everything I see him in. And I don't know the actor's name, but I think the kid who played the main character did a pretty good job of playing someone who is a total Pokemon geek and trying desperately not to be. It's a bit of a cliched take on it, but I did think he did a very good job with the role. Bill Nighy was amazing, as he always is. I don't have anything else to add to that. Let's see, what else? Let's rewind to the beginning of the film for a second here. One of my favorite... Justice Smith, thank you. One of my... Yeah, no kidding, Cole. One of my favorite bits of the film, I should say several of my favorite bits of the film, were the non-action sequences. I know that sounds like a weird thing, but my point is the film actually kind of lost me in most of its action sequences. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Because they weren't that interesting and they weren't that well done. It was just, you could almost feel like the script said, okay, it's been 30 minutes, or like 10 minutes or whatever. Let's have an action sequence. Okay, here's another 10 minutes. Okay, here's an action sequence. It followed that pattern very simply. And I can tell you why. It's because the kids were sitting to the right of me, right? But the non-action sequences were good, in my opinion. There is a great scene, probably my favorite scene in the whole film, is when Pikachu, Detective Pikachu is sitting there, and the kid's sitting there, and he's just talking in a very open and honest thing about how I should have gotten on that train. You remember that scene? I should have gotten on that train. But I didn't. My mom had just died, and And that was just a very well acted, very great, very personal moment. And it was good. It was good stuff. I loved it. Agreed, Beat Nuki. I liked that too. Lol, Takoida. I also... So, a couple other things I really enjoyed. Even though this was totally the plot of Batman, you know, the Tim Burton's Batman, I did like how Mewtwo wasn't the bad guy. I also liked how Mewtwo was ludicrously powerful. That actually makes perfect sense to me. That Mewtwo... I've said it before and I've said it again. Mewtwo should be basically top tier in the Pokemon setting. Even in my own bored-down version of Pokemon, I would still put Mewtwo at the top of that level. And I liked how they show several instances of the kind of power he can present. Basically straight-up magic. I also like how the only way they actually got him was because he was completely distracted. Yeah, right? Joker, the balloons, and then the gas, right? Well, they're not there, Emotion Pond. They don't exist. And also, yeah, the Mr. Mime scene was great. Even though several of those gags were in the within the trailer, I still thought that it was great the way that... What the heck is the name of the kid? Smith's way of dealing with him was, okay, hang on, I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to pull out a match. Oh, you're going to... Okay. Just pouring gasoline all over the place. Tim, thank you, Tim. Oh, that Mr. Mime scene was good stuff. I like that. I also kind of liked the way they did the battle arena. The underground battle arena. Because, of course, there's going to be an underground battle arena. Why wouldn't there be? What I also liked about the Mr. Mime scene was that Tim understood Mr. Mime basically just like that, perfectly well. It was the Pikachu who was like, what's he talking? What? Huh? It never understood him. But yes, so the battle arena scene... I said this about the trailers, and I say this about the film itself. The film went just dark enough without going over the line for me. And I liked that. I liked the fact that they did have a bit of darkness in it, but not too much. You know, it was an underground battle arena, but, you know, whatever. The Gengar was great. Yeah, the Gengar was great. The Charizard was great. I also kind of like the gas being used as like a performance enhancement thing because it just kind of makes the Pokemons go crazy. The Gyarados thing was a little bit... Yeah, I would agree that the human actors, other than Tim and Bill Nighy, were kind of lacking. Like, I can't remember the name of the reporter lady who was not very well presented in the film. Yeah, I was just, okay. And then there was Asshole Face. Oh yeah, the Gyarados looked terrifying, as he should be. He's Gyarados. Yeah, that's a good way to put that. Noir light. I like that, Gulvide, because it was, you're right. Yeah, just all of a sudden Gyarados. After the fight was over, of course. Let me just... I know this is way towards the end of the film, but I have to say, I actually really like what they did with the Ditto. Now, they mentioned there's like one brief line about this being an enhanced Ditto. But if you think about it, this is a Ditto taken to its logical extreme. And it makes perfect sense, and I thought they did a great job of it. The Ditto seemed legitimately threatening, which I liked. I liked the fact that a Ditto was an actual serious obstacle to overcome. So, yes, I'm with that. Absolutely freaking horrifying looking, because of the eyes, but, you know, whatever. But I was talking about, yeah, no kidding, Golvag. I was talking about Asshole Face, right? The guy the Ditto was primarily being. I admittedly called that right at the beginning. I actually used a parallel. I was talking to Third about this. I used a parallel about that, and I can't remember what it was. But it's a thing that fiction does where they try to convince you way too hard that this is the problem over here. That this is the antagonist. And every time I see that, I go, yeah, okay, that's not the antagonist. There's someone else here. They did that in Dragon Quest XI. They did that in Return of the Joker in the DCAU. I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about. When fiction's like, look at how... And they're just a jackass, right? And it's like, yeah, no, that's not the villain. That's too obvious. That's way too obvious. Now, I will admit that I thought Bill Nye was the villain solely because he was being played by Bill Nye. But, I mean, I was right. Hey, Negodai. Yeah, it was surprisingly good. I agree. That's a good description for it. Surprisingly good. I hope we see more of this. I really do. I hope this goes somewhere. The speaking of Bill Nye, he was good. Of course he was. He's Bill Nye. But what I like best about him was he managed to portray someone who he didn't have enough depth to him to really be a fully fleshed out villain. He was more like a 2-note villain, maybe 1.5-note villain. But I did like the perspective of him still not being actually evil. I do still like that. I do still like the fact that even in this noir light thing, he wasn't trying to murder everyone. He wasn't trying to butcher them or eat their children or whatever. He just wanted to turn everyone into Pokemon. Now, that's still bad, but that is much more of a Pokemon threat, right? And I'm with that. I'm totally with that. And that's true. They actually brought her back specifically for Pikachu. The woman who plays Pikachu. I don't know her name. Don't ask me. For like the 10 lines of dialogue that the Pikachu had in the whole film. I also, if I might be so bold, I also kind of like... Yeah, I know, right? I kind of like the idea that each, person, each worker within the city has like one Pokemon, and that's their partner, and that's the one they work with. Something about that appeals to the way I've always looked at Pokemon. Like, obviously, we have the team of 6 and Yar Har Har, but in a realistic sense or in an everyday sense, it makes more sense to me that you would have one. Maybe 2, but you get my point, right? One that you are connected to, one that you are close to, your partner, basically, right? And I liked how that was a recurring theme throughout the whole film. Oh, yeah, by the way, so we mentioned the Squirtle firefighters. Was I the only one who noticed that all the policemen had Growlithes? I know that's a stupid thing to point out, but it was probably my favorite reference in the whole film. It's like, yes, all the cops are using Growlithes. Anyways, I'm an idiot. What do you want from me? Kefka is totally just doing his thing there. The Volt Tackle was awesome. Yep, I'm with that. I mentioned the Ditto thing. So I made a comment. I'm sitting here, Bill Nye takes over the Mewtwo and wanders out. And I lean over to Third, and I'm like, did they just leave him in the room with the guy? And Third's like, yep, okay. And then the Ditto was, of course, the answer to that, to why they were willing to do that. But, I mean, come on. Although, in fairness, how the hell are they going to beat a Mewtwo? Now, that being said, the movie did one thing, and it probably didn't do this on purpose, but it made perfect sense to me. Mewtwo is really, really powerful, and also has had literally decades, 20 years, in order to get used to his powers. Bill Nighy's character, I don't remember his name, so whatever. Bill Nighy had like a few minutes to get used to controlling Mewtwo, right? Now, I bring this up because you remember Bill Nighy, when he was trying to convert everyone into the Pokemon, it was this kind of slow wave thing, and it took time and effort, and he couldn't just do the whole city. Mewtwo did this, basically, and just hit the whole city in one blast. Again, that's probably not deliberate, but it does still make perfect sense to me, because Mewtwo is much better at what he's doing than some random guy who's not even used to using his legs. You know what I mean? Anyways. So the Torterra scene. Can I just go ahead and say that the Torterra was probably the most disappointing aspect of the movie for me? Because remember how I mentioned, action sequence, plot, action sequence, plot, action sequence, plot. The Torterra scene was probably the most obvious example of action sequence. And it's just, wait, what? I mean, gigantic Torterra are cool looking, and they did a good job of portraying the scale of them, but they didn't do anything with them. They get up, and they're a threat, and then they lay back down. It was also incredibly predictable. And we also saw it coming the moment they said, growth enhancers. These look normal size to me. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Sure. It's a shame because I liked most of the lab scene. The examining, them looking into Mewtwo and trying to figure out what they're doing with Mewtwo and piecing together the puzzle and blah, blah, blah. I liked most of that. I did. Excuse me. Anyways, what else? Gosh, there was a lot of stuff that happened in the movie. It's actually been a little bit since I've seen it. Normally, I would be doing this discussion much closer to it. Oh, yes! The reference to Mewtwo from Kanto, which has been confirmed off camera, does mean this is connected, like I mentioned earlier. Um, yes, they did cut away Golvug. Maybe she survived. I don't know. Psyduck. Psyduck was actually okay for me, and I mean that sincerely. But I think the reason Psyduck worked is because most of Psyduck's scenes were opposite Ryan Reynolds, the Pikachu. And the two made a surprisingly enjoyable duo for me. No, I'm not going to massage your feet. Why do you want me to do this? Okay, fine. Harry, hang on. Let me just... what do you want me to do now? I think that actually worked out pretty well. Sigh. Sigh. God, what else? There was a lot of stuff to unpack in that film. He totally was, Golvug. Although his explosive headache was actually pretty good. So there were plenty of Pokemon I would have liked to see that weren't in it. I don't even know where to start with that list. Like, they had a good variety, though. You'll notice they had all the way up to Gen 6 Pokemon in there. Possibly Gen 7. I'm not actually sure about that. But they did have even modern Pokemon in there, which I think is a good move, consequently. Ignoring the obvious marketing reason why that's a good move. It's a good move because if they had nothing but Gen 1 Pokemon, that would be a little bit too pandering, I think. But yeah, they had the pandas, they had Ipoms, they had the mushroom things, whose names I can never think of. They had most of the iconic ones. They had Charizard and Bulbasaur. I agree, it would be too limiting, and I agree the variety was good. I agree with Golvike, too. I wish they'd gone even further with the Easter eggs. I find myself wondering how far Tim would have gone if he had actually pursued the trainer career path. Oh, speaking of which, I like the fact that trainer is a career path. Now, I know that's kind of... Well, of course it is, but if you think about it, they never really talk about that in the games, except for a few bits here and there. But I do like the fact that it's an actual career option, and it's basically treated as professional sports. I'm with that. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds. I want to be the very best. He didn't sing that part of it, but yeah, it was a good bit. Trying to think what else. It was a good scene. Yeah, unfortunately, due to the nature of the film, they didn't really go too much into the trainer career path thing. We mostly see what it's like from the outside, from someone who dropped out of the trainer career path, and people who observed the trainer career path from afar. But yeah, I noticed there was no Pokemon Center whatsoever, which is kind of weird in its own right. It makes me wonder if Poké Centers are supposed to exist within this continuity, because you'll notice the scene where Pikachu is totally dying for reals, oh my gosh, that, it's Mewtwo who ends up healing him, as opposed to, the idea of, oh god, I've got to get him to a center, something like that. Even just a line about, I've got to get to him to a center, or maybe if she said, you've got to get to him to a center, and he said, there's no way I can get there in time, it would have been a nice little addition there, I think. What else? I'm running through the film in my head now. Well, do you see the spoiler thing here, Baron? Right there. God, I'm trying to think. I feel like there was another big thing I wanted to talk about and I haven't talked about. What do you guys think? Anything you feel like mentioning that I haven't covered? Or that we haven't covered? God, we've been streaming for 3 hours. I mean, we skipped a Loreweek, so this is kind of understandable. I agree, the Pokemon design was pretty good. I think only a couple Pokemon bothered me. Lickitung. Like, what the hell? What's with the Lickitung? But Greninja was awesome. Does Mewtwo have the ability to heal? That's actually an interesting question. I mean, obviously this Mewtwo is I don't think in the games Mewtwo has the ability to put people in and out of Pokemon, but let's see what TM's Mewtwo can learn. Let's see here. He can learn Recover naturally at level 55. There you go. Bam. I mean, I know that's a self-heal, but that counts, right? So there you go. Mewtwo can actually heal. Anyways. So, first of all, I would like a sequel to this. Absolutely. I'm not sure what I would do with a sequel. That's a good question. Because we can't just do the world of Pokemon, which is what I want. So there would have to be some main plot, and I have no idea what to do for a main plot. I really don't. The only thing I could come up with that is in line with what I want is why don't we follow the story of Tim and his dad while Tim enters the career path of a trainer. Basically, now we've already seen bits and pieces of the trainer career path from outside. Let's see it from within. Let's actually follow that for a bit. It's fairly in line with what Pokemon's about. It kind of lines up with Tim's own story and naturally follows from his character arc, now that he's with his dad and being supported by him. And, like Takoida mentioned earlier, we could do some decent world building with exactly what being a trainer is really like actually day-to-day function of what it means to be a Formula One driver equivalent, right? I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have really looked into what it takes to be insert professional sport here, but there's a lot that goes into that kind of a thing, right? So I love that kind of a take on it. Actually, yes, I do, Goldvog, legitimately. And yeah, as Takoida mentions, and as Beat Nuki alludes to, I like the idea of it not being that glamorous, like not being that great. Maybe it's rewarding, or maybe it's lucrative, but it's not all sunshine and roses. It's a long, hard road for both him and his Pokemon. Which also brings us to the next point. He doesn't have a Pokemon. So we'd have to decide who his partner is for training, or partners if he actually has a team. And that could, of course, be part of it, too. That he's more used to bonding with a single Pokemon, and now he's got to deal with, 6. And that's just a huge issue of trying to maintain a connection to 6 separate Pokemon basically all the time. No, Negodai. I'm just going to chop that off. Also, Negodai made the Pokemon joke. Everyone go stab him in the face. Some guy in red comes and helps him out. I actually kind of like that idea. No. If we're going to reference red, we'd have... I would like it better if red was like... Never name him. Maybe hint at him. But have him be like this mythical person. Like someone who was the... oh god, I suddenly can't think of his name. The Michael Jordan. Wait, is it Michael Jordan? Shoot. Now I'm screwing up all my names. Hang on. Best Formula One driver. Let's just go with the guy I was thinking of. Which is... You're not going to give me the name. Of course you're not going to give me the name. Why would you give me the name? Senna! There we go. Senna. So, have Red be like the Senna. The Artian Senna, which I know I'm pronouncing wrong. Or have Red be like the Michael Jordan. I was right, Michael Jordan. You know, someone who is just legendarily good, who just skyrocketed up the ranks, became champion, and then just kind of pieced out, retired, and was done with it. At absolute highest, I would say that maybe Red is someone that Tim meets, and Red is like, look, this is... You know why I retired, right? Because I was having to keep up with 6 Pokemon at the top of my game for years. Do you know what that took out of me? You know, it basically kind of a thing to help Tim get to the idea that being... So here's where I would go with this. I would want Tim to... Initially, he wants to be a trainer. He wants to be the best, the very best, like no one ever was. But as he goes through it, it's so horrible that, as Dakota points out, he's just... Oh, you know, he just... I want out. This is horrible, this is hard work, and it's terrible. And the arc I would want him to be with, and I know this sounds horrible because this sounds contradictory to the Pokemon theme, but hear me out. I like the idea that the arc Tim goes through is accepting being a trainer and not being the best. That it's okay to be a trainer and not constantly push for the very maximum 0.1% of Rattata range, right? Because that's what Red did. And Red... I would have Red basically be like, yeah, no, I'm out. I pieced out of that. I did it. I'm done. I'm not going back to that. Just go be a trainer. Maybe join a gym. Maybe run a gym. You know, think about that. That's probably the direction I'd take a sequel. Now, that's not what they're going to do, because of course it's not. Another idea... And this is kind of going to what Takoida was talking about. I kind of like the idea of Tim being the... Like, he's kind of feels like maybe he should bow out of being a trainer and instead being part of the support group of trainers. Like, he becomes someone who is a coach, right? Who coaches trainers. Or tries to help... you know, either a bonding coach or a trainer coach or something like that. It's one of the support networks that he himself has interacted with during his career path. And have that kind of fit better for him. You know what I mean? Have that be something that kind of Tetrises in for his mentality better than trying to constantly push himself to actually win. Just another thought there. Or becomes a detective. Why would he become a detective? Who would want to be a detective? God. Sorry. Yeah, well, that's wrong with movies, Caspian. But you asked me what I would do. And that's what I would do. What they're actually going to do is it'll be a big murder mystery, and it'll involve Ho-Oh and or Lugia. And it'll be like, oh my gosh. And then there'll be really predictable twists, and that'll be the actual sequel. It'll probably be good, but it won't be as good as it could be. Could this work as a TV show? Absolutely. I asked several times yesterday while we started playing Pokemon Let's Go, you know, what TV show would you like set in the Pokemon world? And several people said, and I said this too, the idea of like a continuing series of episodes set in Rhyme City, following this continuity, this noir light we've established, sounds really awesome to me. The only downside is that would be really expensive. Like, those special effects were not skimped on. As much as some of the Pokemon looked kind of, they didn't skimp on the quality. Although, as an aside, I don't like Jigglypuff with fur. I know, small thing to point out, but it's probably the only one that actually bothered me. Jigglypuff looked fine, I don't think Jigglypuff should have fur, that's all. Pikachu having fur, yeah, that worked perfectly. He looked great. I'm trying to picture it, Dakota. Because we could go with the route of it being, like, leathery skin. We could have it be, like, scaly skin. There's several different types of skin we could go with. Yeah, I know, Maverick. No spoilers. Do I recommend this film? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Um, Good lord. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and chop off, and we're gonna take our hour break early, and by early I mean like 40 minutes early, because this has been a very long lore week. So I'm gonna take the hour break like I normally do. Hang on, let me chop off the low recording.